The Revenue and Finance Committee shall come to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Zaleski.
Here.
Sims. Harris. Curry. Evans. Martwick. McSweeney. Rita. Sosnowski. Stewart. Turner.
So we have 4 members present. We are in subject matter only today. There will be no action taken on any of the matters before us. So we do not need a quorum. To give everybody a little bit of a lineup today, there's going to be 5 panels with subject matter on a variety of topics, namely data centers, job creation, and economic incentives in general, the Rivers Hedge Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit, the Film Tax Credit, and the Live Theater Tax Credit. It's the duty of the Revenue and Finance Committee to examine these tax credits when they expire or become ripe for discussion in some cases. And that's what we've tried to undertake in the first half of the General Assembly's year with respect to property taxes, and now we're sort of moving on to a different phase. So without further ado, the first panel we'll call up will be the data center panel. And the lineup I have, and if there's anyone else who thought they were testifying, just let Sarah's staff, our staff know, and we can get you up here. But Keith Statz, Phil Horstman, Jeff Sherwin, Lance Alvarez, and Harry Odie, if they could approach the table. I filed House Bill 818 in January, so it is an economic tax credit related to the construction of data centers. So, gentlemen, starting with Mr. Statz, if you could introduce yourselves for the record, tell us what organization you represent, and give us a little bit of a testimony on data centers. We would ask you, to the extent you can, if you have written testimony, there's no need to read it. If you could sort of summarize it, ad-lib it, tell us a little bit in your own words why it's important, and submit the written testimony, that would be great. But go ahead, Mr. Statz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Keith Statz. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce Tax Institute. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 818 and its Senate equivalent, Senate Bill 1744. Both of those bills are designed to promote the construction and maintenance of data centers. I'm going to be very brief to talk about the technical tax aspects of this bill, and then I'll turn it over to the experts after that. Basically, what this bill does is it provides an exemption from sales and use taxes on the purchase of tangible personal property that's used in the construction or operations of a data center. Data center is defined in the Act as a building or series of buildings rehabilitated or constructed to house a group of networked server computers at one site or several sites in order to centralize storage, management, and dissemination of data and information. In order to qualify for an exemption from the sales taxes and also from the electricity excise tax, a data center has to make certain investment in the data center. There's a new capital investment of $25 million. And there's also a requirement that there's a creation of at least 10 full-time jobs. The agreements are entered into with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, who certifies the exemption to the data center in order to allow them to make purchases tax-free. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the other folks.
Good morning, Chairman, committee members. My name is Lance Alvarez. I'm a site selection senior manager in the acquisition group for Microsoft's data center team. My job in the company is to make siting decisions for data centers. I want to share with you how we do this because House Bill 818 will have a major influence on Illinois' competitiveness for these facilities going forward and our ability to continue to locate these facilities here in the state. Incentives for data centers do not represent revenues lost to the state, but represent additional fiscal revenues to the state. Without incentives, revenue, jobs, and the income supported by the jobs would be lost to the region. A brief background on cloud computing data centers. The cloud is really a metaphor for the internet. The cloud allows data and applications to move out of corporate IT servers, server rooms, into highly efficient data centers. The cloud is storing, accessing data and programs over the internet instead of using your computer's hard drive. E-commerce, online retail, medical, data analytics, news sites, streaming video and music, self-driving cars, Wi-Fi, phone apps, Internet of Things, smart homes, smart appliances are some of the biggest drivers of demand and growth. Cloud spending is growing at a consistent rate and is projected to reach $200 billion by the year 2020. It's one of the fastest growing segments of the economy. Data centers are the physical foundation of the digital economy. Data centers are also capital-intensive projects. Microsoft data centers are used for internal Microsoft businesses, Office 365, Exchange, Azure, OneDrive, Xbox Live, CRM Dynamics, Bing, Hotmail, etc., and external businesses, governments, and individuals. My organization serves as the landlord to all business units within Microsoft. As such, those business units look to us to provide the lowest cost options for their server deployment, whether that is here, leveraging existing facilities, or elsewhere utilizing other existing or new facilities. Siting data centers is a very difficult and complex process. It begins with a TCO, or a total cost of ownership analysis. TCO analysis captures both the initial investment, land, construction, infrastructure, fiber, and servers, and the ongoing operating costs for continual maintenance, upkeep, and critical infrastructure and server refresh during the life of that data center. In a prototypical data center model, our total cost of ownership over 20 years equals approximately $9.4 billion. Servers account for over 75% of the total cost of data center ownership, and they are replaced or refreshed every 3 years. Siting decisions are heavily influenced by incentives that reduce server cost. Taxes and energy costs are additional significant operating costs of a data center. House Bill 818 could positively impact sales tax savings for the data center on future costs of equipment and utility taxes. To give you some sense of why taxes are so important in this low-cost environment, Microsoft does a tax analysis for all states, and Illinois ranks in the bottom third. Currently, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Iowa, Missouri, and Minnesota offer incentives to attract data centers. Overall, it's not a level playing field attracting multi-billion-dollar data center project investments. Microsoft began large data center operations in Chicago region in 2009. We both own and operate our data center facility and lease additional capacity from data center providers or landlords in the region. Our continued development in Illinois is important to Microsoft for several reasons. We have made significant long-term investments in the overall infrastructure with the goal to utilize them for years into the future. Along with that, Microsoft pays a significant amount in both real property tax and sales tax combined. Millions of dollars make a difference in a total cost of ownership analysis and directly affect the decision to site a data center in a state or a region. Data center landlords may absorb and pass these costs onto tenants, customers like Microsoft that are leasing capacity in their facilities. However, at the end of the day, higher lease rates are not competitive. Business success requires that we minimize our costs to remain competitive. We sell these services to customers, both internal and external, who demand market prices and can find those lower market rates elsewhere. We work hard to enhance our services and deliver great value to our customers, but if our costs are high relative to our competitors, we cannot maintain a competitive advantage. Incentives are critical to continued success. We support House Bill 818. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez.
Would you pull the microphone fairly close to when you're speaking, fairly close to you?
How's that? Great. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak about House Bill 818. My name's Phil Horstman. I'm the founder and owner of a company called Ascent. We develop, engineer, construct, and operate data centers for enterprise users. We have done 2 developments in the Chicagoland area, one in North Lake that was we scraped a warehouse and built a 707,000 square foot building, a 120 megawatt substation, subsequently sold that to Microsoft. We did a second project there, 250,000 square feet, 40 megawatt substation. Our tenants are Comcast, Walgreens, HSBC, TransUnion, Facebook, and a few others, and that project has still has some capacity. And then we're in early stages of developing a site at 717 South Des Plaines in the South Loop, primarily to cater to the cloud users such as Microsoft and others. I'm actually really excited about this, and Chicago and broadly the state of Illinois sits at a perfect opportunity to do something transformative. From a data center siting perspective, it's probably one of the best places to be in the country. The abundance of power, low cost energy, relatively good natural disaster profile, cool temperatures, and then the fact that it's in the ability to get in the Chicagoland area, which is one of the largest internet eyeball markets with 10 million plus people here. And by the nature of it being an old railroad town, kind of crunched up underneath Lake Michigan, all of the east-west connectivity goes through Chicago. So when you hear about projects going to Nebraska and Ohio and Indiana and Missouri, they'd much rather be here if the playing field was more level. We have about 25 employees in the Chicagoland area with our 2 developments that are currently operational. The economics on a per square foot basis is differentiating as opposed to standard construction. We spend, along with our tenants, about $6,000 per square foot on every gross square footage of a building over a 10-year period. That, compared to $200 over a square foot over 10 years for a standard industrial building, equates on our 3 projects and the capacity that we're able to deliver to the marketplace about $7.4 billion over 10 years of spend. As it relates to construction and operational job impact, data centers always kind of get beat up and a bad rap for not creating a lot of jobs. It's quite to the contrary. They're 24/7 by 365. There's always 3 shifts. They're open around the clock, and there's a lot of drag. So the MIT and a gentleman by the name of Enrico Moretti have studied this in depth, and there's about a 5x job multiplier. So on our 3 developments, again, with the 246 projected on-site jobs at a 5x multiple, that's like 1,230 jobs just in our 3 facilities for the region, and these are good, high-paying jobs. In addition, construction, these facilities are very robust from a mechanical, electrical, fire, life safety, infrastructure perspective. For every megawatt that we deliver for our customers, we have to buy out about 35,000 tradesmen man-hours. Again, on our 3 developments, that would be about 4.3 million tradesmen man-hours. And so it has, again, another positive impact for the region. Working across North America, we kind of continue to see large-scale projects going to other markets, and again, that's why we're here to hopefully change that. We want to compete, and we're simply not getting the projects that are looking around the region to come talk to us out of the lower 48, about 33 states have adopted data center incentive incentive packages. Illinois and California are two that have not done anything yet. I guess that kind of dovetails into the total cost of ownership for our customers and users that Lance touched on. I think there's a great opportunity to pick up a whole lot of business for the state here, and we're here to support 818. So thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. Good morning. My name's Jeff Sherwin. I'm the mayor of the city of Northlake. We have two data centers that Phil referred to located in our town. The challenge of being in the Chicago area, especially in Cook County, is real estate taxes. Even though we grant 6Bs, it seems to be that we are attracting warehousing operations, which do not provide a lot of jobs on a square foot basis. Brings a lot of truck traffic. We love whatever business we can get. But data centers have proven to be, even with the 6B incentive granted to a data center, the real estate tax revenue generated off a fully completed data center is significantly higher than what we would see off a vacant industrial property that has the vacant classification assigned to it. The data centers are low impact to the community. The support services that they generate help jobs in the community. So we would like to see some provisions of 818 come into place to encourage more data center development in our area. There's no reason why the Chicago area, already a transportation hub between starting as early as canals, railroads, airlines, and highways, cannot be the same hub for data centers as well. It's great to see these new buildings built. Especially in our area, because manufacturing is challenged, as you know, in the Chicago area and Illinois in general. So the jobs of the future are in the data centers. We'd like to see those jobs stay here in Illinois.
Mr. Odie.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Harry Odie, IBEW 134 Assistant Training Director. Data centers provide and have a huge impact on both temporary jobs, such as construction of data centers, as well as permanent jobs, such as data center technicians, datacom technicians, building maintenance technicians, low voltage cablers, and the list just keeps going on and on. All of these jobs, whether they are temporary or permanent, are great paying jobs. They provide a career pathway for many individuals who can live the American dream by putting food on their table, providing for their families, and educating their children. On the construction side of data centers, the construction workers, the design engineers, the architects provide great employment opportunities as well. Their expertise in the data center business is critical to the success of constructing data centers. Some of these data center design considerations are as follows: conceptual design, detailed design, mechanical engineer infrastructure design, electrical engineering infrastructure design, technology infrastructure design. All of these data centers design considerations need competent people to install them, to maintain them, and to design them. Basically, a data center is a facility to use and house computer systems and associated components, such as telecommunication and storage system. It generally includes redundant or backup controls, such as an environmental controls such as air conditioning, fire suppression, and various security devices. Some of the large data centers are industrial scale operations used as much electricity as a small town will, which requires special attention to the infrastructure of both the building as well as the heart and soul of the data centers. Some of the electrical power designs that we're talking about, they could be one or more UPSs, battery banks, diesel or gas turbine generators. The low voltage cabling, the fire protection, the security system. All these components have to be installed properly and to maintain their integrity during this whole consideration. Security plays an important role with the data centers. Physical access to the site is usually restricted to selected personnel with controls, including a layered security system. In closing, data centers provide great employment opportunities for temporary workers as well as permanent workers. Construction of data centers requires skilled and properly trained personnel. They understand the importance of high-quality facilities that require special considerations that we just mentioned. Workers in Illinois, where these data centers should and must be constructed, can provide the best employees for these centers because they are trained and they're educated to handle these employment opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Odie. I'm going to add Representative Martwick to the roll, and then I'll ask a couple of questions, and then if anyone else has questions, they can certainly feel free to chime in. Representative Harris, after Leader Curry. I'm going to start with Mr. Horstman. The 5-time multiplier effect from MIT, that statistic, to me is intriguing because I think the skepticism on awarding a project a tax incentive of such as this is that it's a very short-term reward for a very long-term gain on behalf of the company constructing the data center. So to the extent you can you walk us through your faith in that multiplier effect and talk a little bit about why you think the mayor, Mr. Mayor, you too, after Mr. Horstman, to the extent you've seen it evidence-wise, the economic activity that arises from the construction of a data center.
Sure, I'll give that my best. A data center is kind of an ecosystem of a great number of mechanical, electrical, and technology systems. So the site requires varying layers of staff, again, 24/7 by 365 to support that because it's around-the-clock operation. So on-site IT people that do racking, stacking, cabling, work on the actual machines to make sure that they're going. Those machines and computers come from manufacturers. The manufacturers have software packages and maintenance and warranty obligations. When there's so much equipment that drives jobs and enlarges service organizations for the computers down to the UPSs, which are the power conditioning equipment, down to the batteries, down to the switchgear, to the generators, to the cooling systems, the air handlers, and really every part, piece, and component that actually gets installed into the building has a separate service organization that has to support it 24/7. I think the other thing that I failed to mention in my opening remarks is that these sites use a lot of power, as you know, and there's been a huge thrust to become more green in the consumption of the electricity. As it goes, as things move to the cloud, it's considerably more efficient to have this equipment running in a data center. It also leads to investment into the infrastructure for the cities, towns, and locales where they're built, as far as electrical and fiber and data. And there's a huge thrust to purchase green energy. We've seen firsthand where these large projects are being sited in other states. There's a tremendous amount of investment in developing wind and solar and other green packages because the larger sophisticated users all have a commitment to purchase green energy.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, when a warehouse is vacant, after 24 months, they apply for the vacant status on the real estate taxes, and the real estate tax revenues plummet, and we're sitting there with an empty industrial building. When the data center comes in, even with the 6B, we see an uptick in the real estate tax revenue, not only for the city, but for everybody else that's piled on the tax bill, the schools, the parks, the fire districts, everybody else sees an uptick, even with the 6B classification. The immediate economic impact, during the construction is tremendous because you have all the tradespeople. Just to give you an example, Turner Construction right now is doing a partial build-out on the existing Microsoft Center in town. They are renting a parking lot from the city of Northlake at $5,000 a month because they don't have enough parking on site to house all the workers. But this just shows you the impact. It's a 350-spot parking lot. They're shuttling the workers over. So the immediate impact is tremendous. Fuel sales, food sales, support services all flowing through the city of Northlake. But long term, it's low impact as far as we don't have the truck traffic on a data center, but we do have all the support staff funneling through Northlake using our facilities, our stores, our Home Depot, our Walmart, our restaurants, and things like that. So it's important, and it's an employment opportunity for people not only in Northlake, but in the immediate region.
How long did it take to construct the one in Northlake?
It took just a little over a year. We turned things around pretty quickly in Northlake. The permits are issued normally, a 6-week period to issue the permits. So we move pretty aggressively when it comes to construction. Our building department's pretty nimble. So it's about a year, a little over a year to construct the data center. But it's a very good project.
I'll go to spokesperson Harris, then Leader Curry. Or was Leader Curry? I don't know who.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be try to be relatively brief. Let me see if I can tie this together. Mr. Alvarez, you indicated, I believe, that there was something about a $9.4 billion. That was what? Yeah, and keep the microphone fairly close, if you would.
Asked a question. All right.
Yeah, bring the microphone in fairly close.
Okay, how's that?
Thank you. So that's a typical. That's to build a typical.
That's the total cost of ownership.
Okay. So obviously a data center is going to provide an awful lot of construction jobs, no question about that, with highly technical people. I'm not sure I understand the impact, the ongoing impact. I mean, how many employees, after that data center is constructed and running, how many employees are we talking about running a large data center?
Well, it depends on the plan of record, the design of the data center. But I can give you a great example for Northlake. For our current, we'll have, once we're at a stable construction phases have finished, we fit out our expansion, we'll have about 225 to 250 full-time employees along with vendors and contractors.
Okay, so you've got 225 to 250. Would, in lieu of the data center tax credit, would an EDGE tax credit make sense if you're bringing jobs in? Are you familiar with that program in Illinois?
Is that still a current program, or is that a?
It is until April 30th.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm not counting on it right now, but yes, obviously any
So
incentive.
something like that would work.
Any incentive is positive.
And let me tell you, so the bill as currently structured applies what we call the sales tax, an exemption from sales tax on tangible personal property used in the construction or operation.
Right.
So if you have to put in a new air conditioning system in a data center, you wouldn't have to pay sales tax on that air conditioning center or system, right? That would be exempt, right? And I guess I'm not sure I understand why should a data center have an exemption that a grocery store or a commercial office building doesn't have, to pay sales tax on an air conditioning unit?
If I could give you, enlighten the committee, if you go to Home Depot and Home Depot installs your kitchen cabinets, there's no sales tax on those cabinets. If Empire Carpets puts carpet in your house, there's no sales tax on that carpet. If you buy the cabinets, you have to pay a sales tax if you install them yourselves. So those quirks are already there in the law. So,
There's a lot of quirks in the law. I don't
I
disagree
understand,
with that.
But data centers would be getting the same benefit, that the people that buy cabinets and carpeting at Home Depot and whether it's installed draperies.
Why shouldn't that commercial office building across the street that rents offices and has to have air conditioning, if they have to buy a new air conditioning system, they have to pay tax on that air conditioning system. Why should a data center not have to do that? Just a question. The other thing is, you as a mayor, you said that, whether you're an individual or a corporation, especially a corporation or a business in Cook County where we classify personal property, and the burden is quite heavy on them, you said that the 6B is insufficient by way of a motivator to get individuals to come in.
Well, the 6B helps, and the 6B is a great tool.
Right.
The problem is the 6B only runs for 10 years. You have to renew it. And the 6B is really a temporary Band-Aid because all you're doing is shifting taxes to everybody else, whether it's the school district or the city. So the
That we know.
The 6B is a great tool, and being on the edge of Cook County, we have no choice but to grant 6Bs.
Okay. And last question, I'll tie it up. And I believe it was Mr. Horstman. You indicated that you'd like to have a data center in the Loop, if I'm not mistaken. Was that? And if we don't have an incentive, and Indiana does have an incentive, why not put it in Indiana? Why do we have to? Is there a reason for proximity? I mean, all you're doing is moving electrons around. Is there a reason for proximity that Comcast has to have one, or Comcast and the other? I think you mentioned Jewel and some others have utilized your centers here. Why can't you put it somewhere else? It's simply an electrical transmission of data.
Excellent point, and I wish I could, except I spent $32 million and bought the building.
I'm not talking about you in particular. I'm talking about anybody who wants to build a data center. If Illinois is so non-competitive, why don't you go to Indiana? I mean,
Because that's what's happening. My site is empty. I've owned it for 2 years, my third project. If I could back up, I would go someplace else, to be blunt.
okay.
I bought the building.
But I understand you have you have a particular situation in that you already own the building. But is there a logic, and maybe somebody else can answer this? Is there a need for proximity? Is there a need to be in Chicago or North Lake or anything else to service your clients, or can you be somewhere else since all you're doing is moving? I don't minimize it. All you're doing is moving electrons.
I would say, all things being equal, large hyperscale users would rather be in the greater Chicagoland area than in Des Moines or Council Bluffs, Iowa, or the outstate areas of Ohio. Because these projects, they're not able to get the tradespeople to do the jobs fast enough. It's hard for them to get the technical support job. All of the 5X job creation multiplier vendors that I spoke about, those folks struggle in these outlying markets. But the simple fact is that it's not economically viable to come here anymore. If I didn't own the building in the South Loop, I would be pursuing competitive states and sites. I have a handout that I brought. I'll make available to you guys. There's about 18 projects that I've not been able to compete upon over the past, not too many years that you guys can look at. I'm happy to discuss that in detail, but, I just not able to move the building at this point.
All right. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Leader Curry, for the last round of questions.
I'm not sure I have any questions, but I just have a few comments.
Leader
And
Curry, hold one moment. Add Representative Sims to the roll.
In the good old days, companies made decisions about sites, about location, based pretty much on quality of the workforce, amenities, are the schools good, what's the cost of energy, what's the cost of doing business, what are the taxes like? Those were the kinds of things that went into the business decision. Today we are listening to 8 or 9 proposals that would create tax loopholes, tax benefits for industries or for site-specific, River Edge, for example. And I guess my concern is this. First of all, in order to keep taxes low, it's difficult to say, okay, we're going to give lower taxes to you than we're going to charge you. So every time we give a tax break to a data center or a film tax credit, we are basically making other people pick up the slack. And at the end of the day, I don't think that then the state can say, yeah, we're a low tax state, because you're going to have to raise taxes in order to be able, I would guess from an economic perspective, to make up the difference. And I guess I find it disconcerting that when Mr. Horstman, I mean, I'm glad you built in North Lake and South Loop before you noticed that Illinois didn't have a tax credit to offer you. But I noticed from your testimony, you say these 18 would only entertain states with tax incentive packages for data centers. And my underlying concern is, first of all, what I see is a little bit of corporate blackmail going on. If we can't get Illinois to give us a tax break, let's see who will give us a tax break. And to me, that is not a way to build the overall economy of these United States. You're not helping our gross national product when we say, we'll give you something over here, and then we'll use that as leverage to make somebody over here offer you something just as good. So I don't think in the first place that we ought to be in the business of deciding which industries get preferential treatment. I feel very uncomfortable that we are in a situation where if we want to compete, we may have to offer special deals to this group, but not to that group. And at the end of the day, I think we're looking at something that is hard for me to define as other than a little bit of corporate welfare and a little bit of corporate blackmail. So those are my concerns about this issue. I'd love to see more data centers in Illinois. I'd love to see more jobs, a variety of jobs. But these are my underlying concerns.
Thank you, Leader Curry. Add Leader Turner to the roll. Gentlemen, thank you. I filed House Bill 818. I share the concerns of Spokesperson Harris and Leader Curry. However, I think we have seen enough periodic evidence, empirical evidence, that we are becoming an economy less and less of widgets and more of digital space. And to the extent we are creators of digital space, we have to be competitive in trying to get the makers of digital space to come to our state. So I understand this has been a good, robust airing of the issue, and we'll keep you guys abreast of our discussions as we go forward. So thank you for making the trip out here today. We are going to go out of order a little bit and bring up the film tax credit panel, followed by the live theater panel. So live theater people, sit tight. We know you're here. Mark Andro, Van Stevenson, Brian O'Leary, Bill Guidera. I don't want to pronounce your name, Mr. Guidera, and mispronounce your name. Mark Andro, Mark Hogan, and Christine Dudley to the table, please. Ms. Dudley, you have been you wish to be our MC, I'm told, of this particular panel. So to the extent you can, lead us off, and then to whoever wants to follow would be great.
Right. Thank you, Chairman Zalewski, Leader Curry, Representative Harris, and all the members of the Revenue Committee. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to discuss our Illinois Film Tax Production Act today with you. The Illinois Film Office is a bureau of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Our goal is to grow, sustain, and provide economic and job opportunities for local vendors, crew, and filmmakers. As the director of the Illinois Film Office since February 2015, my responsibility is to manage the day-to-day activities of the Film Office, including the management, compliance, and administration of the Film Tax Credit Incentive and Live Theater Tax Incentive. As the film industry's gateway to government, our office actively markets Illinois as a comprehensive destination center for the production of film, both feature and independent, television, including network cable and online multimedia, and advertising, commercial advertising, in order to create, train, and retain jobs as well as promote diversity in the workforce. In fact, Illinois is the only state of the 35 with active film tax credit programs which requires the submission of a diversity plan with the project's tax credit application. In addition, our office fosters the economic development of industry and ancillary businesses and commerce essential to production infrastructure. As a result of the film tax credit program, the state has realized significant revenue and spending and the growth of good-paying jobs generated by this industry. In the words of the line made famous by in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. In addition to revenue, jobs and development of new business, we have seen an increase in the retention of college graduates seeking careers in film production. DePaul University is now rated in the top 20 film schools in the country. Pardon me. Northwestern, Tribeca Fash Point, Columbia College, SIU, and graduates of we find graduates of those film programs, and also from the Hoosier State, from Notre Dame and Indiana University, all now calling Illinois home. Anecdotally, our office has seen the return of many native Illinoisans from the respective East and West Coasts that because they realize the opportunities in Illinois will allow them to be a part of a fully developed film community to practice their craft either in front of or in behind the camera. Above and beyond the recognizable television shows and films produced in Illinois is the success of The Onion. The Onion, you say? The iconic satirical paper has evolved into a digital content provider. They employ 150 people and are headquartered in the River North neighborhood. They relocated their operations to Illinois specifically because of the Film Tax Credit Program. In 2016, Univision acquired 40% of this company. The acquisition represents capital for enhanced production, including a development deal with Lionsgate Studio for 4 film future projects. During my tenure in this position, we have continued to build our private sector production, labor, academia, and commerce partners. The return on investment to the state in calendar year 2015, $330,850,000 and $330 million in Illinois spend and Illinois wages, which accounted for 11,100 job hires. Last year, $499 million, or $500 million, as I like to say, in Illinois spend and Illinois wages, representing a 51% increase over 2015, and representing 13,377 job hires. In 2016, the overall diversity of hires and crew of production office staff was 49%, up 14% from when the requirement of diversity reporting was implemented in 2005. Protected class includes females and racial and ethnic minority groups. As you will hear from many of the stakeholders with whom we work with on a daily basis, the business of show is cutthroat and competitive. While Illinois' tax incentive is much more modest than many of the competing states and Canada, Illinois is uniquely positioned for the film business because in addition to our tax credit, the state has assets represented in our world-class production, acting talent, iconic locations, film-friendly communities, and the facilities that set us apart from those competitor states. To that end, Illinois is #1 in the Midwest for film production. And we are #3 in the United States for commercial advertising production. And we are in the top 7 in the country for overall production. The explosion of video and content providers in the past 5 years was not anticipated when the credit was first instituted. Streaming services that produce and finance original content, such as Amazon, Netflix, and Hulu, and most recently NBC's CISO, have expanded the playing field, which translates into more production needs. Adding to the success of the program is the establishment of the episodic television programs produced entirely in Illinois, including NBC's quartet of Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago Med, and Chicago Justice. We're looking for a 5th. Empire, APB, and Exorcist, all produced by 21st Century Fox. The Chi, also produced in conjunction with 21st Century Fox and Showtime, as well as Amazon's Patriot, Sense8, and Netflix's Easy. Another benefit of the Chicago series are the 4 full hours on network TV each week that feature iconic locations around Chicago, resulting in additional tourism advertising. This spring, Illinois is home to 3 independently produced motion pictures: Widows, directed by Oscar winner Steve McQueen, starring Oscar winner Viola Davis; What They Had, starring Oscar winner Hilary Swank; and Captive State, currently filming and starring John Goodman. The recently released Two Dig Graves, filmed entirely in southern Illinois, has opened to favorable reviews by the New York Times, The Hollywood Reporter, and industry critics. Showcasing our downstate assets expands the marketing portfolio to attract even more opportunities around the state. The production professionals from whom you will hear testimony this morning will further detail the history significance of our program and how Illinois is meeting their needs, and how the partnership with Illinois is providing a significant return on investment to our state. The contribution of the creative arts community is a key component to the future of Illinois. My commitment to and enthusiasm for these opportunities is undeniable. I am proud to play the role I'm proud of the role that public service contributes to enhancing the quality of life for thousands of Illinoisans. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. And I will turn the mic over to Van Stevens, representing the Motion Picture Association.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And to the extent that you all are anxious to give us testimony, if you could introduce yourself, put your name on the record. And again, we all have the ability to accept your written testimony. We really want to hear from you on the importance of the tax credit and why there needs to be stability beyond the next expiration date, which is in 3 years. So thank you for your testimony here today.
Thank you, Chairman Zaleski and members of the committee. I'm Van. Sorry. Great. My name is Van Stevenson. I'm Senior Vice President of State Government Affairs for the Motion Picture Association of America. We represent the largest motion picture and television producers in the world, including the Walt Disney Company, Paramount Pictures, Sony Pictures, Fox, Universal, Warner Brothers, and CBS Corporation is an associate member of MPAA. Just to summarize my testimony first, many of you in this room may or may not know that the tax incentives in the United States, and particularly in Illinois, started here. In 2002, a motion picture called Chicago was produced by Miramax on a soundstage in Ontario. And when that came out in the media, Mayor Daley and others raised the rhetorical question, why not here? It was, it was done in Toronto primarily because they had a tax incentive program. Illinois did not. Virtually no state in the country at that point. At that point, many states, including Illinois, started to look at the economic value and of bringing motion picture and television productions to the state, and obviously a production tax incentive program was developed. It's predictable, it's sustainable, and so far in Illinois, it's attracting motion picture and television producers. And to give you some numbers, there's been a 24% increase in Illinois production workers that are employed. We did an analysis of payroll company data over the last 5 years. 9,200 people approximately were employed 5 years ago. Today, it's well over 12,000. If you combine direct and indirect jobs that are supported by this business, it's 57,500, $2.5 billion in spend, which is pretty significant. In 2016 alone, I think, as I said, there were 12,321 people in direct production-related jobs. In addition to actors, directors, writers, it includes carpenters, scenic designers, electricians, production staff, bookkeepers, hairstylists, truck drivers, makeup artists, etc. 2015, 291 television, theatrical motion pictures, and commercial projects were produced in Illinois. And just to emphasize a number that Chris was talking about, those productions in 2015 generated $333 million in spend. Now, from 2012, that's a 44% increase. It was $184 million that particular year. And based on our research department's analysis and looking at the stability and predictability of this program, we'd forecast in 5 years, if this program continues, this could be $1 billion industry in Illinois. We urge this committee and the legislature to continue to support the program, extend it. That will provide additional stability. You all have attracted a number of television series that you'll hear about that Chris alluded to from my colleagues at the studios. And right now, that's where the primary production business is to grow in a state like Illinois. There are 440 television series now being produced in all platforms, from television networks to the internet. You've got a good share of them, but there's tremendous room for growth. You have tremendous infrastructure. You have a great film office. There's a great city film office here as well. And we look forward to coming and continue to come to Illinois to produce. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Anyone else want to offer testimony?
I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Jim Sharp with Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp.
Chairman Zaleski and members of the committee, it's a privilege to be here in the field. Okay. Chairman Zaleski and members of the committee, it's a privilege to be here today and appear before you. Thank you. Appreciate it for the opportunity. By way of introduction, my name is Jim Sharp. I'm the Executive Vice President of 20th Century Fox Television. And in this role, I'm the person who decides in our company where to shoot television shows. And in concert with film commissioners, labor people, state officials, we examine the opportunities that we have, and it's up to me to recommend to the company where to shoot them. These include, and I'm not going to go into great detail with, Christine did a great job, Vans also, and covered a lot of ground, but we do produce Empire. We produce APB, The Exorcist, and The Chi. We also produce shows, the #1 hit on NBC right now, This Is Us, Modern Family on ABC, Homeland. We have about 30-something shows going right now. But let me begin by saying the state of Illinois is a great destination for producing television shows. And I strongly support making those shows here. The film service tax credit, making it permanent, extending it for 10 years, I'll go into that in a second. But I think it's important to tell you that the Illinois Film and Television Tax Incentive Program began as a labor credit in 2004, like you introduced. In 2004, with many government and private sector people and some labor people, some of them are still here today, over a handshake, my handshake, we sat down and created a labor agreement, and an agreement that was based on trust. I said across the table, if you trust me, I'll trust you. And that's the deal. And it exists today. A lot more formal. After 2000, so we brought Prison Break there at 2004 and produced Prison Break from 2004 to 2006. It was a very successful show for us. In 2009, the program changed and it became a 30% tax credit, and it also included spend. And that today is an unbelievable program. So last year was just one of the many that we can talk about. But I would like to go back to 2004 for a second here. Because in 2004, when we came and talked about Prison Break, it was just me. Nobody else. And we placed a bet on Illinois that day. And many of our TV and film companies in our town now take credit for it, but they came and followed. And today, just looking as I came, out of my office yesterday, it's $125 million we put in to this economy last year. There were no jobs. There were no skilled labor people. There were no real facilities. We used a warehouse. I was telling Vance, when it rained the first day after I made that deal, I realized it was like I didn't have a roof on it here. It was horrible. And it was raining on the prison sets that we had built. So from the beginning, what I look at when I'm looking at what's essential to put a production into a state like Illinois, there's 3 legs of the stool. One is the skilled labor. It's essential. The second is infrastructure, and the third is a sustained low cost. Today, and it was mentioned, Local 829, the costume designers, the Teamsters, the IA, all these crafts. It's broad. It's a variety of people that you need a team to build and make a television show. Today, you know, we work with the DGA and SAG and AFTRA, and they get all the, but the people that do the hard work are really the people on the ground. And a show like Empire has 150 people working on it every day. When we first arrived in Illinois, you know, it was hard to fill these jobs, and we had to bring people from out of town. Today, with Mark Hogan, who's sitting at the counter here, and John Coley from the Teamsters, Mark from the IATSE, you have one of the finest, trained, skilled labor groups in the nation. Now, in 2004, you had nobody. We're 2017, you got one of the best groups of people that can make television and film product. And it was built on trust, and these two gentlemen that I just mentioned, Mark Hogan and John, that's all it is for me, trust. They trained people, they built it, they said they would, and they did. So the second thing is infrastructure. Now, again, I go back to that original warehouse. It was horrible. There were no sound stages here. There were no post-production facilities here. Today you have sound stages, you have post-production facilities. Nick Mercopoulos, who was the founder of Cinespace, in 2010 and 11, he was sitting in our office in LA. His president, Alex Picios, they showed me the property, which was Ryerson Steel. It was like, you guys are from this state, I'm not, and it was horrible. Along with Craig Hill, who works as a senior vice president with me, he's my right-hand guy. He built stages at Disney. You think Nick and Alex were happy to meet him? They were. So from that point in 2011, when we made Playboy Club here in town, they built the first stage. And I was surprised when I left my office the other day, and I had to call Alex to double check that it was right. They have 30 stages today, 30. So I didn't believe it. I called Alex. He says, yeah, we have 30. I called Warner Brothers, I called Paramount Studios, and I called Universal Studios. Do you know only one of those companies has 30 stages? You got 30 stages here. So it's an incredible story. It's an incredible accomplishment. And our early investment in this state and the bet that we made, again, goes to the unbelievable growth that you've had in a short period of time is second to none. The third leg is sustained costs, it's low costs. When you're making a film, you might have a 3 or 4 or 5 month need for that tax program. In television, the only way it works is for people like me to go back to the people that I report to and say, you have a sustainable program in this state. Illinois' program right now is great. If you could make it permanent, I'm telling you, the people would come like crazy. If you can extend it for 10 years, it'll be fantastic.
So not to interrupt, but to the extent you can answer that question, what kind of certainty, and then this may be for other members of the panel too, what kind of certainty in the law, I know Representative Sims' bill is 10 years, is that the amount of certainty you need in the tax credit? And this isn't just for you, sir. It's for anyone who wants to answer a question on the panel.
I would say, and everybody can chime in, but I can tell you there's states that have no certainty, and we left, like North Carolina, with Homeland, a very successful show that's still on the air today. When you have certainty in my position, I'm not talking about Empire anymore. Empire's on the air. It's doing fine. It's not going anywhere. I'm thinking
That's
about
good,
what are the
because
next...
I know we have a lot of Empire fans in the panel and the audience.
That's good. But I'm thinking about where I am. Right now, the business that we're in, we have a cable business and then we have our primetime business. The primetime business just went through their pilot season. We have one here in Chicago. And it is about the first or second week in May every year that shows get canceled or shows get ordered. We're betting on Illinois extending this program, and being here. If it doesn't, then we have to look for other opportunities. I'm looking at the future. I'm already a year or two ahead of Empire. Empire is like a part of his, that's like me talking about 24 X-Files. Like those things, once they get going, are in motion, and we're making, episodes which become valuable content to us. Empire is valuable content. I'm thinking about The Chi. I'm thinking about the pilot we just making. I'm thinking about convincing guys like Sean Ryan, who is from here, who did Chicago Code, which was the precursor to Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, and Chicago and all this other stuff. The guy who ran those shows, Matt Olmstead, he ran Prison Break. You think that Prison Break had an influence on him bringing Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, and Chicago Med, and Chicago Justice here? Of course it did. He used to work for Stephen Bochco on our lot. He's a friend of mine. There are people like that who are talking about development in our business, and development is what I'm trying to work on. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to produce it? Do you have stages? Do you have talented crew? Anyway, so the last thing, and I'll get out of the way, I think what is really, really also impressive here is that you have exceptional film leaders. Christine Dudley, Rick Moscow, those are fine. Some of the finest people we have in the nation, and they're here. So again, when you're me talking to the people, the people who I report to, they're pretty obviously who I report to. That's who I'm talking to, and that's who I'm trying to say. Empire is a show that is set in New York, story-wise. It's in Chicago. So it doesn't have to be Chicago Fire. It can be anything. Chicago has great locations, great cities. It has the architecture. It is so cinematic. It's far more cinematic than anything else in the country, period. So anyway, the program needs a few changes, maybe. But if we could suggest one, that would be to either make it permanent or make it extend it 10 years. That sustainability for a person in my business is what I look for. And the minute it does not appear to be sustainable, it just comes off the table of recommendations back where in Century City. So in closing, I just really want to thank you for the opportunity. Two things. One is to let a guy like me come here and talk. And then two, for the production tax benefit program you got in Illinois. It's outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, also to follow up on Jim's comment in terms of how long or what kind of structure you should have. You all compete on the world stage, and right now, probably the most competitive are California, New York, Georgia, and Canada. Georgia has an uncapped permanent program, and that's why they've had explosive growth. Canada's very similar, New York, but again, there's enough production, as Jim alludes to go around for everybody, and this is a very desired location, and I think that's why we're emphasizing the sustainability and predictability, particularly for TV. You need a long period of time, and I think that's something that you all ought to seriously consider.
Thank you, Van. Is there anyone else who wanted to offer the prepared testimony?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Brian O'Leary from NBC, and then obviously our community is fulfilled and greatly by local small business, and Mark Andrew will speak after him, and then our friends in labor will represent the labor community and as part of the opportunity to tell you how impactful this credit has been. Mr. O'Leary is from NBC.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Brian O'Leary. I'm tax counsel with NBC Universal. Thank you for allowing me to appear before you. Just a little bit about my background. So in my responsibilities, part of what I do is advise the Jim Sharps of NBC Universal on where we should make our films or television series. Although they may have his title, they don't have his charm. So let me just be clear about that. It's a difficult job. So just thinking about the sort of work that we do, on every production, we're looking at 4 to 5 different locations where we can meet our script requirements, where we actually have production resources, where we can get labor, infrastructure, and of course, where we can do all of that within the contours of our green light numbers. our budget. So there are over 36 jurisdictions in the U.S., and there are over 30 countries around the world, I'm not even including Canada, that have incentives that are calibrated to do what? Diversify their economies, create job opportunities for their residents, and drive an interest in tourism exposure value for those jurisdictions. It's against that backdrop that Illinois has done extraordinarily well in competition. And they've done it, the state has done it on its own terms. I just want to spend a moment talking about the mechanics about this incentive. We've talked about how it competes, how this program pencils out. Just understand that as compared to the majority of jurisdictions around the world that provide an incentive that includes non-resident cast and compensation costs, as well as goods and services that are brought from outside the jurisdiction, the way Illinois is structured is that the only costs that are recovered in part are payments to local residents, capped at $100,000 per individual, and payments to Illinois vendors for goods and services. This program was calibrated to do what? Compete on the merits as compared to the production centers in North America, New York, California, Ontario, British Columbia at the time. I would submit to you that Illinois does very well. From NBC Universal's point of view, it's done extraordinarily well. If you just think about where we are as a company in 2016, this is one of our favorite jurisdictions, thanks to Jim Sharp. So it's one of our favorite jurisdictions. Last year, we had 8 projects, 4 scripted series, 3 unscripted series for cable and broadcast network, and as Commissioner Dudley mentioned, we also have a comedy series on our internet service. And I just want to spend a second on that because to me, this project, Shrink, speaks to the breadth and capacity that Illinois has as a production destination. This is a project. Matt Baltz is a Second City alum, lives in Los Angeles. The intuition would be that's where we would do this show. But because of this incentive, we brought the project to Illinois, drew on the resources for our principal cast, our guest cast, as well as our writers from the improv and sketch scene that exists here in this city. So I'm not sure if any of you have CISO. I hope you do. It has been critically well reviewed, this project, Shrink. And what it does, if nothing else, is shines a light on what we think is one of the cornerstones of the creative class in Illinois, your comedic talent. So that is just one example of the sort of productions that we can make possible here in Illinois. Of course, the centerpiece of our primetime lineup is our 4 Dick Wolf franchise shows, Fire, PD, Med, Law. Those shows, if you think about where we started in 2012, one pilot, we spent $5 million on payments to Illinois residents and Illinois vendors from that greenlit pilot, which became the first episode of season 1 of Chicago Fire. By the end of this season, we'll have produced 252 episodes in Illinois. In CineSpace, that is our home. So if you think about your arsenal, your assets as a jurisdiction, the incentive is important. As you build out, as this state builds out its infrastructure, CineSpace is one of the great tools that you have to attract high-end television as well as feature films. This past year in 2016, we spent $174 million on our 4 shows on local labor and local talent. And we asked the question, what does this mean to the economy overall? Because the numbers are just getting so large in Illinois, it's hard to actually grasp it. So we asked the advisory firm MNP, who does a lot of work for the Canadian government, the province of British Columbia, the city of Vancouver on film matters, as well as the state of New Mexico, help us quantify what it means to have these 4 shows in the Illinois economy. So that $174 million translates to $340 million of economic activity. That is increased sales for Illinois businesses, $250 million of increased Illinois gross domestic product, $180 million worth of wages, 2,700 full-time equivalent jobs. That is, these 4 shows generated 2,700 one-year full jobs for Illinois workers. That's the opportunity.
So I know you mentioned the 4 Chicago shows. My dad is a former Commissioner of Streets and Sanitation, so he's anxiously awaiting Chicago Sanitation, so he can be brought
I think
on
that
as
one's
an
for
advisor
CISO.
to that show. Thank you, sir, for that testimony. Representative Turner, and then we will. Is there any, before we get to questions, if there's anyone offering, is there anyone else on the panel? I know Labor wants to offer a brief testimony. Is there anyone else that wants to offer a brief testimony?
Mr.
But we
Andrew.
do have to go to a different panel very, very soon. So, to the extent you can be mindful of that, we'd be appreciative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief, and members of the committee. My name is Mark Andro, and I represent an organization, the Association of Independent Commercial Producers. We're the folks that make the ads that run on the shows that these gentlemen, companies are producing. And commercial production we're small businesses. Typically, our companies have 1 or 2 working partners and maybe 1 to 8 full-time staff employees. But even a small company can do a dozen or so commercials a year and ultimately hire crews that create a lot of jobs. And our company's typically annual revenues range from a couple $100,000 a year to I would say up to $10 million a year. So we do the actual production. We're like general contractors. We hire the crews and find the locations and the actors. But we're based in Chicago. My business, in addition to being head of this organization's chapter in Chicago, I have my own business, and I've been in business 28 years in Chicago. And I will say that in the late 1990s, 70% of my productions were done in Canada. And it was, even with the travel costs of a couple of Chicago people, it was still less expensive to film a commercial in Canada because of lower costs, a favorable exchange rate, and talent costs. And because of this shrinking work here, the infrastructure shrunk, and there were film labs went out of business, and camera rental houses closed, and crew members took jobs in other industries, and they would work in construction because there wasn't enough work in film production. And it was at that period of time that this organization, the Illinois Production Alliance, began and organized with stakeholders of the labor unions and production companies and actors. And we got together and were fortunate enough to get the first film tax credit passed. And the effect of that tax credit has been striking. It was, in terms of local small businesses, it made a dramatic effect. And last year, 70% of my company's commercials were produced in Illinois and 0% in Canada. And the infrastructure, instead of shrinking, is now growing. We have camera rental houses that are moving to Illinois, sound stages are opening up, and the film crews are swelling. I would also like to point out, because of the diversity requirement in the tax credit, the diversity of the crews has increased significantly, and we have a lot of good paying jobs, and we have a very diverse workforce, and it's all a result of the tax credit. So I thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Brad Matthews. I'm the president of IATSE, Local 476 Studio Mechanics. I have with us our business manager, Mark Hogan. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, it's a pleasure to appear today and talk to you about what this incentive has meant to our members and their families. To let you know about us, our members comprise up to 80% of the crews on set and off production. We do everything from makeup and hair and lighting to special effects. As a 40-year member, I can tell you that we have done this business part-time for a lot of those years, always looking to build the kind of industry that we've attained. But with this tax incentive and the building of CineSpace, our membership has doubled in the last 5 to 6 years. We're up to 1,500 members now. We do a lot of all these shows and commercials and in motion pictures, and the incentive has changed the footing of what we do. Like Mr. Andros said, what's changed really has been the infrastructure. The people that have opened up businesses here, camera houses and caterers and lighting shops, and they're here to stay. Back in the old days, we'd finish a movie and there'd be nothing else coming in. Everything would leave town, and we'd start over from scratch. But nowadays, we have what we've always wanted, a continuing stream of work for our members. We run an extensive training program. We're incredibly more diverse as a local, and we look forward to building even bigger. Right now, we're busting at the seams with the infrastructure that we have here. And we look forward to continuing this hard work. And believe me, this is hard work that our members do, and we like to think they're as good as anybody else in the country at what we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Leader Turner stepped away. Representative Harris with a question.
I will be
Representative
brief.
Sims
Thank you.
to follow.
In honor of former Mayor Daley and Mr. Stevenson, what you mentioned, and apparently the impetus that started it all, we'll have a little musical interlude. All that jazz. Great. Great play, great movie. A couple of quick questions. Were any of you involved with the movie, Tom Hanks movie, Road to Perdition? Ring any bells? No. Okay.
Yes.
That was done in Chicago.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
It was filmed down at the General Jones Armory,
Correct.
Which is one of the tallest buildings that they could have.
We got
open
somebody there
space.
today, too. We have
Say again?
We have a show shooting there today.
A movie, Captive State, is
And
with John Goodman.
it really is evident, the number of workmen that go down there for those sorts of productions. A couple of, though, quick questions, if I may. Chris, refresh my memory. What is the tax credit? It's 30% of qualified production
That is
spending.
correct.
What is qualified production spending?
Qualified productions are many of the items that were noted here in terms of, we have a laundry list of the items that have to be made and have to be purchased in Illinois. So it's 30% of qualified expenditures related to and purchased in Illinois, and salaries of Illinois residents only, up
Okay,
to
so you-
$100,000.
So you have a list of, that was my
Correct.
second point, you have a list of what the qualified items are.
Correct.
Talking about salaries, the 30% of salaries up to the limit is 100,000?
That is correct.
Is that 30% of payroll? I'm sorry, 30% of payroll taxes, or what?
That's 30% of the overall, right, up to 100,000. Payroll.
Bear with me. Are those payroll taxes that then don't have to be paid on, or
No,
is that
the-
30,000? If I have an employee that has
Representative,
$100,000,
One distinction in terms of this credit, which is unique, I think, than the other credits that you're talking about, all of the monies have to be spent up front. We do not issue a credit until an application is given to our office, and they have to qualify under the conditions set forth in statute. The projects then receive what's called an accredited production certificate. That says that the state, as a contract, if you will, if you fulfill the remainder of all of this, all of these tenants, we will issue a tax credit. Therefore, all the money is spent up front, and then after the last invoice is paid on a project, the project has up to 2 years to claim the credit. But first and foremost, it has to be reviewed by an independent CPA. And then, so to your question, I know that was a little more than you, but the taxes have been paid on all of the things, and then the credit is issued based on the overall spend.
so if you employ 10 individuals with the salaries of $100,000, you've employed individuals with salaries worth $1 million, does that mean you're going to get a $300,000 tax credit? 30%?
Yes. Right? I'm going to refer to the accountant. That is not my strong suit.
I want to understand how it works. So it's a tax credit on the total value of the individual salary, not on the payroll taxes that are due on those salaries.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, fairly significant. All right.
Yeah, and they are paid. The economy and the state realizes all the taxes paid. If somebody is doing
Right.
rental
Okay.
taxes
Got
paid.
it. Got it. Last question I have. My analysis indicates that the Department of Revenue is opposed. Are you aware of that? Do you know?
I am Brad.
And they're not here, so I can't ask them, but they indicated that my analysis says they're opposed. I don't know
Opposed to?
why. The Department of Revenue, the Illinois
I
Department
know,
of Revenue.
but they're opposed to the overall program.
They're opposed to the bill which extends it for 10
Oh,
years, I guess, which would mean opposed to the overall program. I was just curious if you knew why.
Representative, just most Department of Revenues around the country are opposed to production tax incentive programs. That's just the nature, because their job is to collect revenue, not to pay tax incentives.
Well, true, but if it's as much of a benefit as it is, they're going to be collecting a lot more revenue from the employment of individuals and the like, and the downstream sorts of implications. But okay, thank you very much.
Representative Sims and Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Dudley, as you and I have talked about before, this project, this program is very near and dear to my heart, because this is one of the areas and issues that I worked on when I was on the other side of this process. So I'm following up a little bit on Leader Harris's questions. I'm interested in the bonus credit that's offered for individuals who are in high unemployment areas. So how much is granted for those incentives? How much has been paid out for
That
those?
is a 15% bump on a salary that is determined from if the individual lives in a area of high employment, and those figures are obviously updated per the unemployment statistics.
And how is that determined?
And that would just be for that individual's salary.
So is that determined by Department of Labor standards? Is that census tract? How is that determined?
I'm going to defer to our film tax credit manager, Cesar Lopez, who actually does the granular detail on that.
Okay.
Cesar? Cesar Lopez, film tax credit manager extraordinaire.
His reputation precedes him.
Thank you. Yes, it's first, it's only for the Illinois residents who earn a minimum of $1,000, and they live in areas they must live in areas of high unemployment, currently defined as 150% of the state's annual unemployment rate. Last year it was currently it's 7.8%. Excuse me. So a person residing in that area, their wages would qualify for up to 45% credit. Realized credit overall, on average, is about another 3%, simply because there are individuals living in there. Based on the overall credit, we're seeing roughly a 3% bump is what we're calling it.
Okay. And there was also a recent report in one of the dailies that talked about, there's a watchdog report that says that there has not been reporting back on the numbers of African Americans, Latinos that have been hired and that are going into the industry.
Actually, that was an incorrect. The report that you're referring to in the Sun-Times was incorrect as it relates to. We are required by law and by statute to report our job hires, broken down by diversity. As I noted in my testimony, we have a breakdown every quarter that we submit to the General Assembly. What I believe the report was referring to was the vendor statistics relative to the vendor qualifications that we have discussed. And we are working to address that. The statute was onerous and burdensome as it related to the ability to be able to collect that data. So we are working with Senator Holmes in the Senate and also on the House side to correct that so we can provide meaningful data as opposed to data that would not be necessarily allowing us to analyze the growth and the opportunity that we should be experiencing with diversity.
Well, what the concern is that making sure that individuals of color are not just the talent on the front of the camera, but also is behind the camera.
Actually, Representative, we do not track the front of the camera in our data. Our data only includes behind the camera.
I'm not arguing that. My point is that when this credit was put in place, the idea was that we would be building this industry for all communities, and we want to make sure that is happening.
Actually, the data that I provided in the testimony, and I'm happy to review that with you, was that we have seen an increase from 14%. We are also seeing a consistent instability within all areas that are considered in the diversity. And again, we report and we're happy to provide that data to you but can we do better? Absolutely, we can do better. And I think the community at large, including this administration, are looking very closely at and working on additional opportunities for education and training, but also with your assistance, outreach into the communities to make sure that the opportunities are understood on what is available in this growth industry. And we're working to identify those and really make sure that the opportunity, sometimes if you don't know that something exists or understand it, and it's incumbent upon all of us to work together to do additional outreach, and we welcome that opportunity.
And I look forward to helping and working with you on that. I'm also interested in the auditing function that takes place. So how does the auditing process work? And maybe this is a question for Cesar.
And Cesar can feel free to chime in, and actually some of our stakeholders here who painstakingly go through that process. An attestation, which is a new word that I have learned, is prepared by an independent CPA of all of the qualified expenditures. They work independent of the production, but in preparing all of the qualified expenditures. And those then are presented to our office and then reviewed again to determine that all of the information, we require invoices, we can go back and ask for information regarding proof of payment, so on and so forth, payroll. The books are usually about this big for Mr. Sharp shows and Mr. O'Leary shows, and we go through those line by line to identify that all of the expenditures and payroll are indeed qualified. Plus, we require proof of residency in the form of a state ID, an I-9, and/or an Illinois driver's license. For the purpose of making sure that the salaries that have been identified as Illinois residents are indeed just that. And there's a lot of other things that go into that. I'm happy to have Cesar comment on it. He's on the front line. He himself is an accountant, and we have a very small team that works very ably to make sure that all of this is in compliance, and also a very strong group of CPAs, which is again another area of opportunity in terms of professional services working within the film industry.
How long does it take to establish residency under the program?
How long does it? You have to have a legal driver's license, which obviously that means you have a legal residency here in the state of Illinois.
Let's say a worker comes in and they get a driver's license, they get an address, get a driver's license, then they establish residency on that
Again,
day.
the statute and rule require that establish residency based on an I-9, a driver's license, or a state ID.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Dudley, and stakeholders for being here today to answer the question. I'm really happy that we were able to have this subject matter hearing specifically on the film tax credit, tax credits, Senate Spaces in my district. And so Senate Spaces has been a great neighbor, and I've worked very closely with Alex. And my questions around the minority hiring and the reporting numbers, which Representative Sims just brought up, and you addressed that it was more of an issue, I guess, on the vendor side and having those numbers reported. And that's fine. I haven't had the opportunity to actually review them myself, but whenever I hear those issues, and I know labor has been a great partner for Senate Space and the shows that are operating over there, and that always sounds like an opportunity for, I believe, labor to help bring some of those minority numbers up in different cases. And I don't know if that specifically would apply to the vendors, but I know with all of the expert training that you guys are providing and the people who are getting a chance to work over there and work in the industry behind the scenes in so many different areas, it's just been a great opportunity. But like I said, as far as I know, Alex has been very responsive, and whenever we bring anybody by the studios who's looking for an opportunity to work, whether they're a returning citizen or anything like that, they've been very, very helpful in giving them that chance. So I've been grateful to have CineSpace in my area, and it's done so much for the community around the theater, around the studio as well. And that's something I just wanted to communicate to the committee, and that I'm glad the committee is getting a chance to hear about the number of jobs involved just between the 4 shows that were mentioned, 2,700 permanent jobs right there, and other opportunities that revolve around the studio have been wonderful for the city of Chicago, for this industry, and in particular, again, I keep bringing it up, the North Lawndale neighborhood. And because of so many people operating in and out of the studios, there's been a big boom in like Airbnb and homes being brought around the studio and being rehabbed and being built back up. And that's all good for the neighborhood. They've been a great partner with Mount Sinai Hospital as well, who's right next door in their facilities. And just in terms of the neighborhood in general, and some of the shows being filmed in the neighborhood, and again, giving opportunities to everybody for employment around there. So I'm really happy about the $174 million spent between the 4 shows and the $340 million of economic activity that it translated into. We have an administration here who has been very adamant about building the job opportunities here in our state and bringing new industries in. And this is an industry that took a chance on Illinois back in 2005 and has grown and been one of our shining lights. So it's been huge for Chicago, huge for the state. I'm really hoping that we can really give these tax credits some consideration going forward, specifically this film tax credit, and give some certainty to this industry so we can continue to see the uptick and boom here in Illinois and in Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Turner. Briefly, sir, and then we're going to go to the next panel.
Just to add 1 or 2 things here. That gentleman on the left.
Representative Sims, your left or my left?
Oh, he was sitting right here.
Oh, David Harris. He had excused himself.
We have, in the application process, we have to not only identify everything and it's audited. It's audited with a requirement. It's a Chicago-based firm that audits these, or Illinois-based firm that has to do the audits, and that firm works for us, works for them. We don't get 30% back. I wish we did, but it nets down. So that, and then the only other point is, I think it's Cinecares and North Lawndale. Our company, and I'm sure NBC probably does too, we contribute, because of Alex and Uncle Nick, to those programs, those charities. So that's important to us too. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Chicago sanitation, it'd be a big hit, I promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Live theater, you've been very patient. And River's Edge and the folks that are on the other panel, I know you've been very patient. We will get going, I promise you.
Mr. Chairman, do you still need me?
If you don't have to stay on this panel if you don't want to, Ms. Dudley.
It's a pretty straightforward program.
Okay.
And certainly we're here to answer any questions, but I think the stakeholders can speak more specifically to it. But we're happy, because we do the administration, to answer any specifics on the administration of the program.
Okay.
But I think the stakeholders are much more, they'll give a much better commercial as it relates to the nuances of all of it.
Thank you.
And the wonderful
Wow.
props that they brought in.
Sing the neon lights so bright on Broadway. On Broadway.
There's always magic in the air.
On Broadway.
When you're walking down Randolph Street with the support of Illinois leadership,
The glitter rubs right off and you're in Chicago.
Chicago. You feel Chicago hotels and restaurants with Broadway.
With Broadway.
They say we're hit masculine,
But we have confidence in you. We want to thank you for all you've done on Randolph and Monroe Streets. You make the neon lights so bright in Chicago. You make the neon lights so bright in Chicago. You make the neon lights so bright in Chicago.
We know you sat through a lot of tax policy to do that, so thank you very, very, very much. That had to be, hope it was worth it. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your patience as well. In my mind, live theater and film tax credit, you both are equal economic engines to the city. So it's appropriate that juxtaposed against each other, you guys are here today. Please offer your testimony to the committee, and then thanks again for your patience.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm Lou Raisin. I'm president of Broadway in Chicago and one of the founders of Broadway in Chicago. Prior to founding Broadway in Chicago in 2000, Chicago was what the industry referred to as a bus and truck town, where the shows would run 2 weeks and were few and far between. Today, Chicago is the third most important city in the world for theater, just behind New York and London. Broadway in Chicago hosts up to 1,700,000 people a year and 1,000 performances on an annual basis. Our theaters not only add to the quality of life for the people that live in our city and state, but they serve as an economic engine that draws people from out of town to our city, puts people in hotels, our restaurants, our cabs, and at the end of the day, it's all about labor. You will hear supporting testimony today from Craig Carlson, Business Manager and International Vice President for the Stagehands Local 2, Mark Gordon, President and CEO of the Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association, Sam Toya, President and CEO of the Illinois Restaurant Association, and David Whitaker, President and CEO of Choose Chicago. If Austin, Texas can call themselves the music capital of the world, there's a big flag that should be hanging over Chicago that speaks to who we are and the 200 theaters that make up this city, 5 of which are Tony Award winners, all comprised in the League of Chicago Theaters, producing more new work on the stages of Chicago than any other city in the world. I'm here before you to ask for an extension of the theatrical tax credits. Our credits are very limited and apply to lure only 2 types of shows, pre-Broadway and long runs, and they don't apply to our standard slate of shows. Our theatrical credits distinguish themselves in some ways from the film tax credits, from an economic development perspective, quality of life, positive media coverage, tourism, and a very fast and measurable return on investment. More than 42% of Broadway and Chicago ticket buyers come from 100 miles away or more. For our long-run shows like Hamilton, over 50% come from 100 miles away or more. And there's no surprise that visitors from 100 miles away or more tend to overnight and spend more money in hotels and restaurants. The typical long-run show plays 33 weeks and generates more than $1 million per week of economic impact. The typical pre-Broadway show is in production in Chicago for 6 weeks and opens and runs for 9 weeks, bringing an economic impact of over $800,000 a week during the run. Our long-run productions and pre-Broadway productions create incredibly positive national and international visibility for our city and state when we need it, creating conversations about Chicago that are heard round the world. By way of example, in the opening months of Hamilton, Broadway in Chicago generated over $8 million in media coverage, and doing so invited and lured people to Chicago to experience the magic of Hamilton. I'm here before you asking for an extension of the theatrical tax credits that we put in place 5 years ago. And I'm here to tell you that it's working and having a significant impact on our city and state. Prior to the passage of the theatrical tax credits, Broadway in Chicago saw only 4 pre-Broadway shows between the years 2005 and 2012. And now we're averaging 2 pre-Broadway shows per year. During the period of time that Broadway in Chicago and long-run tax credits have been in place, they've been responsible for creating over 1,000 new jobs. Long-run and pre-Broadway productions create enough economic impact to cover the $2 million tax credit in just under 3 days. Though you may not be accustomed to it, we have good news to report. Live theater tax credits work, and we come before this committee to report to you that the vision the state had has resulted in jobs and wins for our city and state that has proven to be a strong tool in the rise and growth of a vibrant industry, and we ask your support in helping us to keep going, thinking bigger and doing better things.
Thank you, Lou.
I'd like to continue on if we could, Greg.
Sure, of course. I'm going to actually put Representative Sims in the chair for one moment. Go ahead, sir.
Chairman Zalewski, members of the Revenue and Finance Committee, I'm Craig Carlson, Vice President of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees and Business Manager of Stagehands Local 2. I represent 135,000 workers across North America, many of whom, on a nightly basis, transform the imaginations and pipe dreams of Broadway producers to flawless realities enjoyed by audiences that travel far and wide to experience the shows we stage here in Illinois. Illinois Backstage Workers are a collection of like-minded men and women of all races and creeds, dedicated to the belief that the show must go on, and are bound to our craft by our particular skill: digital audio, intelligent lighting, stage rigging, wardrobe, hair and makeup, carpentry, theatrical electric, properties, set decoration, automation, pyrotechnics, and more. Many of our workers raise families here. They own homes, attend schools, shop, use healthcare facilities, contribute to civic causes, and vote, and some even eat at Sam's restaurants. They're blue-collar, middle-class workers, regular folks that help build our communities in Chicago and across the state. The work they perform on long-run and pre-production Broadway blockbusters helps position Chicago and the state of Illinois as a world-class destination, rich in culture and lit with glowing marquees advertising smash hits like Wicked, Jersey Boys, and Hamilton. I know firsthand this was not always the case. I've been in this business 38 years and my family for 110 years, and until the tax credit came along 5 years ago, we'd rarely get a chance to be involved with a long-run or pre-production Broadway show. Now, those full-time Broadway blockbuster jobs were strictly reserved for London or New York, although Chicago eventually would present brief, watered-down bus and truck versions of the massive production previously showcased in London or New York. Since the tax credit leveled the playing field and enticed production to Illinois, we now regularly present both long-run and pre-Broadway production. Our jobs have doubled, our memberships have doubled, and our retirement plans are now funded at north of 97%, and they climb with every additional long-run or pre-Broadway production that comes to town. The long-run and pre-Broadway productions which bring us here today bring millions of dollars to the state of Illinois. They create meaningful jobs not only for the Stage Employees Union, but for the Chicago Federation of Musicians, Actors Equity, Teamsters, box office workers, ushers, front-of-house workers, designers, entire armies of production support, management positions, and more. I thank each of you for the many hundreds of jobs you've helped create with this tax credit each year. History's proven these type of productions would not have otherwise come to Illinois. I realize tax credits are scrutinized by many and are issued only with great deliberation and care, and I understand why. However, as a taxpayer, I'd rather have part of something than all of nothing. And this particular something, blockbuster Broadway production, is quite significant. It's an economic engine worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the state of Illinois every year. It pays for itself many times over, and it provides many Illinoisans a middle-class career with good wages, health care, and a pension. I thank you for allowing me a voice here today, and I thank you for your consideration in extending our tax credit.
Representative Zaleski back in the chair, but Mr. Rezin, I had to step out, so I missed the performance. Can I do an encore?
Stick around a little bit. We'll
Yes,
see
sir.
what we can do.
I'll go next.
Thank you, Representative Sims.
Good morning, Chairman Zalewski and members of the Revenue and Finance Committee. Again, my name is Sam Toy. I'm President and CEO of the Illinois Restaurant Association. One of the central missions of the Illinois Restaurant Association is to promote and advance the restaurant industry of Chicago and Illinois. One of the ways we do that is by supporting our partners in the entertainment, hospitality, hotel, and tourism industry that are so vital to the success of restaurants. When a theater goer plans for months and spends hundreds of dollars to see a Broadway in Chicago show like Hamilton, that patrons also look to dine in Chicago's renowned restaurants and stay in one of our incredible hotels. I look outside my office window every day at the Private Bank Theater and see hundreds, sometimes thousands of tourists waiting to buy their tickets or enter the theater to see one of the most acclaimed productions of all time. These people come from all over Chicago, the suburbs, and out of state to spend their money on a memorable evening of entertainment, food, and drinks. If we want to attempt to replicate the success of Hamilton, we need the live theater tax credit to do so. The live theater tax credit is crucial because it helps premier productions pay their employees, offer world-class entertainment, and serves to pay dividends to the city and state. The tax credit provided by the state of Illinois to Broadway and Chicago helps our theaters lure in the most popular shows and dynamic talent from all over the country, which in turn provides massive benefits to the restaurants, hotel, and tourism industry of our state. The money the state invests in Broadway and Chicago pays for itself and then some. With every Broadway and Chicago ticket sold, it creates a ripple effect. A meal at Italian Village, a stay at the Hyatt Regency, a shopping spree on Michigan Avenue, breakfast at the Gage, a tour of Chicago's First Lady, and so on. While the business community certainly appreciates the dire straits that our state financiers are in, we only ask that we continue to make the smart investments necessary to drive our economy, pump more tax dollars into state coffers, and support job growth across multiple industries. We all benefit from the state's continued support of Broadway and Chicago through the live theater tax credit. I urge you to continue these worthwhile investments in the city's growth as an entertainment and culinary capital of the United States. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am Mark Gordon. I'm President and CEO of the Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association. Mayor Emanuel loves to brag how the number of visitors to Chicago has increased from 39 million in 2010 to over 54 million in 2016. The number of visitors to Illinois has also increased to over 110 million in 2016. A big reason why visitors increased to Chicago and Illinois during the past few years is the large number of people who come to attend a live theater production. Long-run shows like Wicked, Book of Mormon, Hamilton have brought millions of visitors and have filled hundreds of thousands of hotel rooms over the past few years. As Lou indicated, 1.7 million theater goers attend 1,000 performances each year through Broadway in Chicago. As he said, 42% of these ticket buyers, or about 700,000 per year, come over 100 miles or more, with even more coming from 100 miles or more to see a show like Hamilton. These Broadway in Chicago productions, therefore, have helped increase hotel revenues by several $100 million. Why is significantly helping hotels increase revenues so important to Illinois and Chicago? Well, guests staying at hotels in Illinois in 2016 spent $19.7 billion, of which $11.8 billion was spent in Chicago. Hotels in Illinois support $7.1 billion of federal, state, and local taxes paid, of which $2.1 billion in taxes was supported by Chicago. But most importantly, Broadway and Chicago productions have helped support 144,000 hotel jobs in Illinois, including 87,000 hotel jobs in Chicago. And these are good jobs that pay entry-level employees in our hotels $18 per hour to start, and another $7 to $8 per hour in benefits. We pay for health coverage, sick time, and vacations. So these are good jobs, and these are the jobs that are generated by our hotel industry. Our hotels are located in all 102 counties in Illinois. So we're everywhere, and so are Sam's restaurants. Our hospitality industry employs more women, young people, and minorities than any other industry in Illinois. The hospitality industry is an economic engine and job creator in Illinois and Chicago. And the blockbuster, long-run, and pre-Broadway shows are a major engine in helping to fill hotel rooms and increase tourism spending. The Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association strongly supports the passage of House Bill 1135, and we urge you to have this bill passed. Thank you.
You know, I thought I would start off with song. No, unfortunately, that's not my strength either. But Mr. Chairman and honored members of the committee, thank you for this time. And I think the fact that the leadership of the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, labor, and our tourism industry are here at the side of Lou and Broadway is indicative of our acknowledgement, collectively our acknowledgement of the importance of this sector. And we're all in this together in terms of tourism and reasons that people choose to come to our great state and to, in this case, to the great city of Chicago. So obviously I'm speaking and strongly encouraging you to continue the great vision that ultimately is the bill and the extension that we're talking about. You know, you like to hear, and I don't think you get enough credit, quite frankly, of the smart investments from the past that are paying off today. There's so much conversation about where we are in our state, but it's your vision that Lou mentioned, the vision of your predecessors 5 years ago. It's working. And I think you should take great comfort in the fact that the numbers that you're hearing today are truly working. And so, of course, we all encourage you to continue that vision and don't stop the momentum. It's not lost on me that 5 years ago as well as when Choose Chicago was created through the vision of the state in a partnership with the city. And again, you've heard the fact that we've gone from now over 39 million to over 54 million in those 5 years. It's one of the largest growing sectors and largest tax growing sectors in our state. And largely in part because a tourism product is about what you offer visitors and what distinguishes you from visitors. And clearly Broadway in Chicago and Broadway and theater and stage in general, those 200 stages that Lou has talked about, that is a distinguishing factor that makes Chicago and the state of Illinois stand out. We do a lot of research at Choose Chicago. Of course, we're constantly making sure that our marketing strategies and our investment strategies help us attract more consumers, more visitors who are voting with their wallet. So let me give you a couple of statistics that I think are quite telling of why your wise investment is paying off. Last year in our annual DK Shiflets survey, which is a nationwide survey, 20% of all visitors to the city of Chicago indicated that a play or a musical performance was one of the things they did while they visited. And an even larger percentage, 24% of all leisure visitors. Our top 2 countries who ranked theater and stage highest, the UK and China, not ironically, our two largest international markets. When you talk about distinguishing and branding a destination, whether the city, the state, clearly Broadway and theater help us distinguish ourselves. In fact, 44% in fact, of all leisure travelers to Chicago referenced a cultural activity during their stay. And of that, the overwhelming number were indicated theater and dance and museums as that cultural experience. That's what distinguishes us as a city and state in terms of some of our competitors. Interestingly enough, when we look at the visitor activity and their economic investment, the difference between the average visitor and the cultural visitor, the average visitor spends $580 a day. That cultural traveler spends $700 a day. They're here, as is indicated. They stay overnight. They go to a great show. They take in dinner. They enjoy what makes this city and this state shine. Lou talked about the media attention of Hamilton alone, the kind of publicity that we generate from our predecessor group that was talking about film and this partnership. That's media attention that we don't have the money to invest, the tens of millions of dollars that we're getting in free publicity because of your wise investment and the opportunity to allow this sector to thrive. And lastly, before I close, I would just share with you that we've never been in a more exciting time. The first quarter, we've heard the numbers from last year, up over 2.5%, 54 million visitors. The first quarter has just completed. We are tracking ahead 4.3% in leisure visitors. So while we're talking about exchange rates and reasons not to visit, the tourism community, hotels, restaurants, our labor partners, and theater are helping this industry succeed in very challenging times. Like I said, a record number of leisure visitors last year, first quarter up 4.3%, and overall demand is at a 6% growth. There are more and more reasons to choose to visit Chicago and Illinois. This sector is one of the most distinguishing, and as I've shared with you, one of the most cost impactful. Your vision 5 years ago is working. I implore you and encourage you and thank you to keep that vision and that wise investment strategy. And I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions.
Well, thank you all. You've been patient today. I was the sponsor of the Live Theater Tax Credit. There's no one to whom its importance needs to be imparted on more than myself. I certainly, I don't know if you've noticed the theme here today, but the theme of the hearing has hopefully been stakeholders working collaboratively, restaurants, hotels, labor, business, the entertainment industry, working collectively to grow the Illinois economy, grow the Chicago economy. I think you guys are a shining example of that, and we'll advocate zealously to renew the tax credit, knowing how important it is to you. So thank you for your testimony. Thank you to those who participated. Oh, Representative Marcus Evans with a question. Go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, just kind of a comment. I have a good friend I went to high school with, Omari Head. He's a young African-American gentleman who's a partial hotel owner. Went to UNLV for college. Is from Chicago, so he's my inside lobbyist on the hotel industry. He travels all over, and he's always telling me how important it is. And he and, of course, Kim Bennett was one of the reasons why I want to be on the Revenue and Finance Committee, but also we have a tourism committee because we in the Jones Center really value what you all do, and especially the collaborations. I go to a lot of the hotel restaurants, so I see you all kind of really as one industry. We got great restaurants within our hotels, and just I think this is a segment of good news for the state of Illinois. You know, it's always some bad things, but this is one great segment, and that's why I chose to be on the tourism committee. And I look forward to supporting. I think this is a tax credit that we could see. Some of the other tax credits, we're asking for explanations. I don't see the data entry, what have you, industry, but I see you all every day. It's very quantifiable. I hope to work with you all to push for even more tourism, even within our various communities. I represent the South Side community, and I grew up in a poor household, working class, and I always saw tourism as an educational tool. So I think there's still a segment of tourism that you all can tap into, and hopefully we can work together with a lot of our low-income communities around the nation. And I was down in Memphis, and a lot of those kids, they'd never been to Chicago. Why not? You know, that is the way in which we open up doors to community. So you all just do so much, and you make it beautiful. I mean, I can't wait for the hotel on 22nd Street, in which I believe many of us supported the legislation to make that possible. So I'm just eager to see the growth. I just came back from South Florida and couldn't wait to come to Chicago just to see all of the bustling things that's happening here. They got some things there, but you all survived and you battled the cold. So I really, the Chicago industry, with the weather that we have, I just think you all are phenomenal. And I look forward to continue to pushing for more. But thank you for what you've done. And again, I hope to push for Choose Chicago and World Sports Chicago. I just see it all, the collaboration, and we got to keep it strong. So I'll be a champion.
Thank you.
See no other questions. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your patience.
Get on your feet. Get up and make it happen. Yeah, get on your feet. Stand up and take some action. Get on your feet. Woo! Hold on, run, 3 Broadway credits. Get on your feet. And you will make it happen. Get on your feet. Hold on, run, 3 Broadway credits. Thanks for having us. Get on your feet. And so let's make it happen. Thanks, you guys.
Mr. Residency, that was an encore. Thank you. You ask and you shall receive. So thank you so much. Right on cue. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you.
Okay, 2 more panels. Representative, I'm sorry. We have this listed as Mr. Ivory, the Tom Folks, Ryan Dresler, Jonathan Crawford, Lori Clark, Janet Mathis, and Craig Coley. If they can approach. I won't lie to you guys. That's some big shoes to fill. To the extent you're willing to try, we welcome your testimony. There's a gentleman. I think it's Mr. Folks that has to get on a plane. Is that accurate? If you could go first, and then we'll go to Mr. Gilbert, and then the Newmarket folks.
Chairman Zielinski, other distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Tom Folks. I'm with the Entertainment Software Association, and I apologize that I cannot carry a tune to save my life. I apologize. But I am here to talk about the video game industry, which is fun and exciting in its own way. So I represent the Entertainment Software Association. We're the U.S. trade association that represents publishers and developers of video games throughout the country. And you may ask yourself, who are those? They're household names. Some have been mentioned this morning through some other panelists. Microsoft, obviously a big developer of video games with their Xbox. Some of the film representatives that were here earlier today, also very involved in the video game industry. And we are actually a $30 billion a year industry here in the United States, and $100 billion internationally, over $100 billion internationally. Put that in a little bit of perspective. The film industry, the domestic box office of the film industry is about $11 to $12 billion annually, and the music industry has contracted to about $7 to $8 billion annually. The video game industry, all in domestic revenue, $30 billion. And so I'm testifying here today regarding Leader Turner's House Bill 2832 that would create the Digital Media Tax Credit Act, very similar to the film industry and the production credits that we discussed earlier. This bill would create a 30% tax incentive on in-state productions and salary, as we discussed earlier. A couple of differences from our industry. The state of Illinois actually boasts a number of elements that could create a very robust, vibrant, and sustainable video game industry, development industry here in the state of Illinois. Number one, there are companies. There are about 75 companies here in the state of Illinois that employ about 1,600, directly employ 1,600 employees with an average annual compensation somewhere around $100,000. So these are highly sought after, highly trained, highly compensated jobs that you want here in the state of Illinois. Also, you have some world-class institutions of higher learning that is training the next generation of video game designers. We look at Bradley University, the Southern Illinois University, and DePaul. Those three schools alone are actually on the Princeton Review's top list of top schools for video game design. And DePaul, their graduate program is in the top 10. So you have the talent, you have the companies, and now what you need is to be competitive with other states and countries. And with that basis here in Illinois, you need to compete for the jobs. And if all things were equal and there were no tax incentives out there, the best talent would win. But it is. The incentives are out there, and this is exactly what we're up against, and the competing for these jobs. And the states that are competing are doing very well. Illinois, again, we have all those important factors that go into a video game development and making you successful, but our incentive, as proposed, is just for new jobs. As I mentioned, well-paying jobs, highly skilled, highly compensated. And this is a growing industry. As I mentioned earlier, it is bigger than some other entertainment segments. And we continue to grow. And our employment is double the rate of the U.S. double the U.S. job market, double the rate of the overall U.S. job market. And also, when we look at this industry, we look at the industry as a whole. There are no winners or losers. This is for everyone, every one of the small guys that it's at a local incubator to the big guys that are cranking out AAA titles at $100 million or more, that are generating $100 million or more. So long-term, these are long-term production. The production length of an average video game is anywhere from 9 to 16 months. And then there's add-on content that can keep these jobs viable for well over 2 to 3 years, or even another version of that game that would be produced and come out. So we've seen this work in other areas. There's a number of states to point to, but they don't all have the valuable components that much as an industry that's already based here, and the talent that is coming out of the schools. So I would recommend that the legislature look seriously at Leader Turner's Digital Media Tax Credit Act, and we hope that you'll take it under full consideration.
Thank you.
Good morning, committee. Good morning. My name is Vincent Gilbert today, and I'm here to speak on the Economic Development for Growing Economy program, the EDGE program. The Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce, which is affiliated with the National Black Chamber of Commerce, is the largest advocacy group for black businesses in the country. We are in 46 states and 23 countries. The EDGE program since 1999 has created $1.3 billion in revenue, and also has created 34,000 jobs and has retained 46,000 jobs since 1999. We support all efforts on both sides of the aisle to keep this important program. We also have some recommendations, Mr. Chairman, that we feel would strengthen this program. We hear a lot of conversation about how Illinois is not competitive as it relates to other Midwestern states. Well, the EDGE program is a quiver in our toolbox that really is a positive for us. We believe that the legislature and the executive branch can come to some agreement in keeping this important program. We would make some changes and would advocate for some changes. They are and not limited to. We want the program to apply to small business owners, those that create jobs, at least 12 full-time jobs, and would show an investment of at least $2.5 million in capital investments. We also believe that companies that employ 100 or fewer employees, that the threshold of job creation would be lowered to 3, and that the investment from $1 million would be lowered to $500,000. That would allow the true engines of the state, small businesses, to participate in this program. And we think by having small businesses to be able to participate in this program would be a fantastic result. We also support reform. Since 1999, we can talk about the failures. Sears comes to mind on how they were given incentives, but they closed and laid off employees. We would argue that a provisions of penalty for those corporations that take the tax credit and either relocate, lay off employees, or close. We believe that this measure would go a long way in retaining, but we also support this tax credit and some of the amendments that the executive branch has made, that the emphasis should be on new job creation. And we don't want to get in Illinois in a bargaining or a higher bidder situation, especially taking our current financial position. The committee also asked the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce to offer some recommendations on how we feel that companies and small businesses in particular can grow. We support the following positions. 1, we believe that the inclusion of all unions in good standing with the United States Department of Labor be included on any project labor agreements. We believe that that would have an immediate impact in the minority community as it relates to construction jobs and construction contracts. We believe now that Illinois has a situation that does not promote competition. And we believe that by adding all unions in good standing, that the state of Illinois would be well down the road on diversity. We also believe that there's an opportunity, and there's been a lot of talk on workmen's compensation reform. If you look at states like Indiana and Wisconsin, our business owners, especially our small business owners, especially my members, can't compete. They start off with everything being equal. They can't compete because of the high insurance premiums of the state of Illinois, which is a bar to retaining companies and attracting new ones. We also believe that when the state sets contractual goals under its BEP status, that there be offered no waivers, and that any state contract should have a BEP enunciated goal. This would increase diversity in the workforce and also in contracting. We believe that the elimination of artificial state barriers and especially in the area of IT. Let me give you an example. On most IT contracts that are issued by the state of Illinois, there is a 50-mile radius provision from Springfield. Well, that is very interesting to us since most of the call centers are foreign call centers in countries like India, Bangladesh, Korea. We also find it very interesting that 95% of the black small business IT companies are located in Chicago. So when you put a 50-mile radius limitation from Springfield, you have just effectively cut out 90% of those companies that would make that state contract diverse. We don't see why there would ever be a 50-mile radius limitation from Springfield. It makes no sense. We believe that the Illinois toll road, which heretofore 3 years ago was one of the worst examples, now has one of the best practices in the country as it relates to the inclusion of diverse companies. They have eliminated artificial barriers like retainage and other things. And so we really take our hats off to Bob Schillerstrom and the staff at the Illinois Toll Road to actually, they've heard the cries of the small business and they have changed. We would also encourage that the Illinois Department of Transportation adopt exactly the rules and regulations that the toll road has. We know that the governor has been very instrumental in creating a sheltered market program, which we support wholeheartedly. We believe that the initiative of the sheltered market program should be extended to construction, and that we could see an immediate benefit as it relates to job creation and the inclusion of small businesses on these construction projects. I'd like to thank the chairman and the committee for allowing me to have this opportunity to address you. If you have any questions, I'm prepared to answer them. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Gilbert. Gentlemen.
Great, thank you. Chairman Zaleski, members of the committee, my name is Ryan Dressler, and I'm with Advantage Capital, and I'm here to speak in support of Senate Bill 652, Senator Claiborne's bill, to expand and improve the New Markets Development Program. So a couple thoughts. I'd like to just give a little background and reminder on what New Markets is at the federal level, talk then about what it is here in Illinois and the history and impacts here, and then some of the urgency with what the federal program has been doing and how we can capitalize on some of those recent changes. So the first thing to describe, the New Markets Program created in the early 2000s, it was an idea, a bipartisan idea on how to go and attack areas that had high poverty and unemployment rates and combat that, to make sure that areas that were left behind had access to capital and to businesses and other growth opportunities that would provide the residents of those census tracts with the same opportunities that some of their counterparts had in areas that were growing. And so that program, the story of that and how it created, it was actually at the time Congressman Floyd Flake in New York, where the original idea came from the parish that he was a pastor at the Catholic Episcopalian Church, and it was modeling after what that church had done in the community. And the big thing that they found was that what was happening is that the community was growing from within, and that money and business was happening in that area because people were invested in that community, and that's what it was able to help that area thrive over time. So they modeled the New Markets Program off that concept. So all the New Markets Program does is it is incentivizing growth capital to be invested into funds that 100% of that money is then invested in what are called low-income census tracts or low-income communities. And so what it is it's a future tax credit that's fractional. It's only a percentage of the actual capital that's raised that incentivizes those dollars to be raised, and then in this case in Illinois be invested in low-income communities. And those communities are defined by having poverty rates of 20% or higher, or having median wages for the family, a family of four that are below the state average. So in Illinois, with that federal program, $50.5 billion has been authorized to be invested across the country, but it's a unique program in that it isn't divided pro rata, just meaning that each state doesn't get its fair share. So in 2007, Missouri passed the first state new markets program in order to help attract more of that investment, and Illinois was right after that as a leader in this industry as well, creating their new markets development program. And what those programs are intended to do is to attract federal investors that have allocations come to the state of Illinois and invest their capital in the state. So the results from that initial program, and so far to date, $500 million has been raised and invested under the state new markets development program, and it has caused an 800% increase in the amount of federal new markets dollars that have also been invested in the state. And this is by getting those national CDEs, which are community development entities like Advantage Capital, to focus their attention on the state of Illinois. Collectively, Advantage Capital and then Stonehenge, who you'll hear from after, have invested about $310 million in 55 different businesses across the state. A lot of that in this area here in Chicago, but we've also hit, I believe, 37 cities total throughout that investment. Some of the impacts with the state program, just speaking from our own portfolio, so of that $310 million that has been invested in those 55 companies, there are 2,600 direct jobs that have been created from that. And the program has a positive return on revenue as of 2014, and that's going to continue to grow as these companies grow. And the reason for those benefits and why it's so impactful is what New Markets has really turned into is it's now become a program to help with the lack of community banking and lending that's available to small businesses. So I'm sure many of you have small businesses in your districts that are good companies, and they have struggled at one point or another to gain credit or capital from their local bank or community bank, either because that bank is no longer there or because the requirements for lending are so much stricter now that they're unable to access that. And so New Markets has really filled that void by providing either equity or debt underneath what a bank could provide or instead of what the banks aren't able to provide, so that these businesses can grow organically like the initial federal program was intended to do. So I'll finish with a couple other thoughts on the impact and then also what the amendments do. So with the federal program, the place that it's currently in is they just extended a 5-year authorization for the federal program, which totals $17.5 billion. $7 billion of that they have already authorized. Just this past fall, announcements were made. And so there's an opportunity to not only capture some of that $7 billion that's not been chosen yet as to where it's going to be invested throughout the country, but also that future investment that's also coming through that program. There's an opportunity to go after that as well. And so it's perfectly timed to look at a program that's worked for Illinois and to come in and to do it again so that we take advantage of what the federal program has done. The amendments in the legislation in Senator Claiborne's Bill 652, the primary ones, the most important ones, one, it would extend the sunset for a couple years through 2021. It would also increase the current cap that is there. And so collectively, this would authorize $625 million to be raised and invested in low-income communities in the state of Illinois. Another thing that's added that I think is really important is the level of transparency to make it easier for the state to count jobs and to count wages. Something that I didn't mention on the impact is with those 2,600 jobs, the average wage is just over $40,000. So when you're talking a $40,000 wage for a small family in a census tract where the average wage is half that, or the living wage is even half that, it's a significant impact that can have on the quality of life in those areas. So that transparency is just going to allow the state to look at the performance of the program so that they have a better understanding of it year in and year out. With that, I'd love to have Jonathan talk a little bit about some impacts and actual stories.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Jonathan Crawford. I'm with Stonehenge Community Development. Like Advantage Capital, we are a community development entity that works with the Illinois New Markets Development Program. And I want to testify before the committee regarding some of the investments that we've made. First, just a little bit of background on our firm. We are a participant in the Illinois New Markets Program. We've invested just over $130 million through that program in the state of Illinois into 16 companies. Our investments span the geography of the state from Chicago to Moline, Peoria, Mount Vernon, and we focus on investing in operating companies in low-income, severely distressed census tracts around the state. And we focus especially on organizations that are having positive impacts on minority populations. We work closely with the National Urban League to identify and analyze investments in companies that will result in significant impact on minority groups, whether that's by investing in a minority-owned business, in a company that has a significant minority workforce, or in a community that is heavily populated by minority populations. A couple of investments to share with you, just to give you some flavor around the types of companies and organizations that are benefiting from this program. We recently invested in 2 Mariano's grocery stores here in Chicago, one of which was in South Side in Bronzeville. That project used a minority contractor for the construction of the project. Those 2 grocery stores are slated to create over 400 new jobs. We worked with the local Easter Seals chapter here in Chicago, which provides cutting-edge services and progressive educational opportunities to low-income children, adolescents, and adults living with autism. Easter Seals in Chicago serves a 98% minority population, and over 40% of their staff represents a minority population. Another deal here in Chicago that we participate in is Olympia Foods, which is in Franklin Park. They are a food processing company specializing in pitas and Euro meats, and our investment allowed the company to relocate to a more distressed part of the community affordably and to increase their capacity. They're currently, the current investment's expected to create 50 new jobs, and they have a 50% minority workforce. And lastly, last deal I'd like to call your attention to is an investment that we made in Lawndale Christian Health Center in the North Lawndale community, which has actually already come up today, and demonstrates the broad impact that the program can have. Lawndale Christian Health Center is a federally qualified health center that provides primary care services without regard to a patient's ability to pay. The investment supported the construction of a new health clinic and fitness center, which is expected to create over 285,000 medical, dental, and fitness visits every year. And since that investment, Lawndale's already created over 100 new jobs. Just a fantastic investment that we're very proud of. I won't go into great detail, but as I mentioned before, we've invested around the state. 6 of our 16 investments are located outside of the greater Chicago area, which is roughly in line with the population of the state. Span a number of industries, manufacturing companies, river terminals for agricultural products, a hotel, and overall we're very proud of the impact that our investments have had on low-income communities around the state. Everything from providing healthcare services to residents in low-income areas to creating good-paying jobs, as Ryan mentioned. We're proud to have improved the lives of Illinois residents through the Illinois New Markets Development Program. So we want to just thank you for your time and
Thank
open
you
for questions.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Well, we're going to flip out the panels in a moment. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. All these ideas are under consideration as we go forward. Especially thank you, Mr. Gilbert, for the testimony on EDGE. That's a big priority item for this committee, and I think your insights are very useful. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to combine the Lori Clark, Janet Mathis, Craig panel with the River's Edge panel, and get this baby off to the races. That's possible. Ms. Clark, can you start us off?
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you. Microphone on?
No, here it is.
There you go.
Thank you. So Lori kind of joked, good evening, Mr. Chairman. But thank you for all of you for staying for this period of time, because this is really important stuff to us. Lori and I are speaking as economic developers today and giving a more holistic view. That's what we were asked to do on not specific tax credits programs, but just in general. And I want to say from a personal standpoint, I'm a 5th generation Illinoisan. This is important to me, not just because we're talking about my livelihood, but also in livelihoods of a lot of other people. My family's been here since 1840, and we're going to be here hopefully another 200 years. As far as who I am, I'm currently the president and CEO of Renew Moline. It's a downtown redevelopment organization. I also am the president and CEO and principal for the Development Consortium, so I've got the private side economic development consulting business as well with Craig Coyle, who is not here, so we're cutting a little time off your agenda. That's okay. I've been involved in economic development for more than 25 years, and I've seen it from a variety of angles, including working for the state. I was actually the state's trade director in Canada for a few years. I worked for the State Department of Ag down in Springfield, and then I worked for DECA DCEO in the Quad City region, so I have a lot of different perspective. Illinois used to be the standard bearer for economic development across the country, and the place that other states came to when they were trying to figure out what to do. But that's really changed the last 15 to 20 years. And like Microsoft and some of the other companies said earlier today, they've got choices, and unfortunately this is not necessarily one of them at the top of the list unless they've got a compelling reason to be here. Something else that's important to realize is that successful economic development is unlike any other part of a community in that it encompasses everything in a community, from the public works department to education programs to nonprofits and other aspects, transportation, other infrastructure. So everything that goes on is important to it, but yet the economic developers don't have any control over any of that. So what you do is extremely important, but it is also important for you to consider holistic views on all of this. So the things that are really important to businesses today, what we hear in a consistent manner, is stability, business climate and cost competitiveness, regulatory atmosphere, and workforce development. I don't have to say to you, the budget, the budget, the budget. It is so important to do something on that, and to also look at the structural deficit. You'd be glad to know when I left the state, I took my pension money out, so you're not going to have to pay for me or figure that out later. But it is important to figure that out holistically. It's anywhere from nonprofits. The Moline Foundation this week at a meeting in Rock Island said that they actually had to fund 11 nonprofits that used to get state funds. They're just not able to stay open. I won't go into those details. But, businesses that do business with the state, they're having to either substantially cut back, downsize, or even close. I think you all know that. Businesses in general want a stability of policy that's not necessarily here today for a lot of reasons. Investment in infrastructure still continues to be important. I'm on the Mississippi River in the Quad City area in Moline. We are getting a new crossing, but frankly, there's another bridge that's really not in great shape, and I've actually told my child not to even go across it right now, unfortunately, but there's a lot of that infrastructure that needs to be taken care of at some point. From a business climate, cost of doing business perspective, Illinois is so rich in assets. We have so much great transportation infrastructure. The public university system has been very strong. The research capacities, we have federal laboratories here that other states would kill for. And by and large, workforce has been good. In fact, we're just starting to see some of the effects we've seen on the coast for a while. When we talk about tax structure, which is what you guys are talking about today, the uncertainty in tax structure is a problem from a business perspective. There are tax programs that have been out there, like the research and development tax credit, the manufacturer's purchase tax credit, that are here for a while and then gone. And so to not know whether or not they're going to exist when they need them is critical to them. As a former state employee, EDGE was very much a tool that we used in projects. And I appreciate Representative Curry's extension, her bill that got passed earlier, to extend at least through the end of this month to try and figure some things out. I agree with what Mr. Gilbert had to say. There are some things that can be changed in that. And I like some of his ideas. I think another in this conversation, Representative Harris, you were asking about whether or not EDGE could be used for, I forget, it was film tax credits or some other things earlier today. The reality is if a corporation does not have an Illinois income tax liability today, the EDGE tax credit means nothing to them because it only applies to that particular, income tax liability, and it can't be transferred. So I know that there are some bills out there right now that do allow transferability or saleability of the credits, and I think that's critical and crucial going forward. There's no certainty of regulatory requirements, and by that I mean oftentimes there's duplicity in agencies, not often, but there are some instances of duplicity in agencies where they're both trying to regulate the same thing. So there's not clarity from a business perspective on who they should be talking to or how much needs to be provided and why they're having to do something twice and incur that cost. And it's increasingly difficult to attract and retain talent. I also want to say in the regulatory atmosphere, because of decreasing staff in different agencies, oftentimes it takes Illinois businesses 3 times longer in the permitting process than it does anywhere around as far as other Midwest states. And I got to tell you, I hate losing to Iowa. I look at it every single day. And I know they're going to talk about River's Edge here in a minute, and I know Bonnie quite well. But one of the ways we're losing to Iowa right now, to get a little specific, is a historic tax credit program. We are in a bi-state area, which is pretty much the same in population on both sides of the river. Developers have properties in Iowa and they have properties in Illinois, and they're choosing to develop in Iowa first because they can get the state tax credit in Iowa. And so to have that disadvantage is really problematic for us. And they're going to give you numbers later, so I'm not going to get into that. But it's really problematic for us, and it's investment that's not happening in the state that could be. And then to Representative Curry's conversation about workforce development, when she was talking about quality of life and things that were important. Workforce development is extremely important to business, but we need to fix that too. And primary and secondary education, because of all the mandates schools have today, for instance, there's at least 12 mandates on teaching genocide issues in social studies curriculum. Kids are coming out of schools, even here in the Midwest and Illinois, not ready to have basic math skills and English skills, and so they're getting remedial education, either at the workplace or in the community college system. VOTEC, I think we talked about that. You talked about that some today too. Not everybody's going to have a 4-year degree, so the welders, HVAC system, and trades people are not necessarily getting the focus that they need. Post-secondary education, we are an outflow state at this point. 45% of our students are actually going out of state to school. I have a freshman in college. He came to me last year as a senior in high school. So the kids are paying attention to all of this. He came to me as a senior in high school and said, should I even be looking at state schools? And he was accepted to 3, including one here in Chicago. And he was very concerned, and they were talking about it in schools, and this is in small Geneseo, Illinois, about whether or not he should even consider a state of Illinois school. And of the students there, in his graduating class of 200, 18 are going to University of Iowa. Again, I hate to lose to Iowa. Did I mention that? And only 1 to the state's flagship university in Urbana. And I think that's just really bad. And I learned recently that the Community College Board has actually got an matriculation agreement with the University of Iowa, making it easier to transfer credits that direction. So I think we need to look holistically on that too, because those students, when they leave, they don't come back often. So what are we doing to increase that ability to have the workforce pipeline? The trades, we do need more trades out there. Even in the Quad City area, we actually don't have enough trades to fulfill the construction jobs we have oftentimes, and they're having to bring people from far distances. And there's definitely a need for investment to upgrade systems they're being trained on. So just to kind of wrap up my commentary, Illinois, by and large, is a flyover state right now. By that I mean national site selectors are telling us that they're not even considering this state, or their clients aren't considering the state for the reasons I just discussed. The headquarters coming to Chicago, the recent ones that are happening, are great, but much of the movement is from somewhere else in Illinois. And so you're really not getting necessarily net gains, and it's to the detriment of some of these smaller communities, which are being left behind in lots of ways, including, losing the jobs, but the aged infrastructure they have. The whole state needs support. And we have to remember that primary job creators are not only creating their jobs, they're creating others that supply to them. And then the people that have the restaurants and the hotels and all that we heard about earlier, they're creating jobs in those industries as well. It's all an ancillary effect. They're also investing in the community by paying taxes in a variety of different ways, the construction jobs they create, and then philanthropically. And I think we lose sight of that too sometimes, that when the lifeblood leaves, when a corporation leaves, a small town in particular, you don't get that back, and it's hard to recreate. So businesses have choices. Right now, they're not really choosing here, and I know Lori will echo this, we want to help be a resource to help you guys work through this and see if there's ways that things can change. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Clark, and like Janet said, I too am an alumni of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity and its predecessor, the Department of Commerce and Community Affairs. As a matter of fact, my first job upon leaving my internship was to write the 6-month reorganization status report for the General Assembly on how the merger that created DECA was going. So I've seen quite a bit over those years. I also spent 8 years with the Public University as Director of State and Federal Relations as well as Economic Development. And I worked after retiring, which apparently I'm a terrible retiree, I worked at a Regional Economic Development Association that administered Small Business Development Center programs, International Trade Center programs, and Procurement Technical Assistance Center programs. Which unfortunately succumbed to fiscal pressures and closed its doors in February. And I also worked at UI Labs, which is the administering agency for the National Digital Manufacturing and Design Innovation Institute, as well as City Digital, which deals with smart technologies for cities. And infrastructure. So I too have had a wide variety of economic development experiences. Janet and I talked beforehand, and I don't, in the interest of time and your patience, which is truly commendable. I will not reiterate what Janet said, but it would rather echo her comments. But I really want to focus on a couple areas because they're near and dear to my heart. The first is on workforce development and education. The Milken Institute every year does a state science and technology index that they look at a variety of various factors that go into each and every state, and then they rank those states according to their performance. Illinois, as recently as a decade ago, was one of the top ranked states. We currently are in the middle of the pack and declining rapidly every year. I think we're now down to 29th or something. And one of the observations that the Milken Institute did or stated is that that they have indicated that those states that have continued to invest in innovation and education are emerging stronger from the recession. And those top 10 states now in that index have been the same top 10 states because they continue to invest in their education and their innovation. Everybody else is just kind of floundering. So I think that's very important to keep in mind, and they do say that policymakers should take that into consideration as they are looking at their strategies and dealing with very tough budget decisions. With the workforce and education in particular, the whole nature of jobs is changing as we are seeing new industries formed from what used to be traditional manufacturing or information technology or whatever that may be, maintenance. We're now seeing whole new industries and whole new job classifications. For example, when I was with the UI Labs and the digital manufacturing, basically that is looking at taking manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, merging that with information technology, and now starting to go into the Internet of Things. That is moving very rapidly. and it's at a pace that our education and workforce systems cannot keep track of. So, and how are we dealing with that? Right now in Illinois, unfortunately, and we're not alone in this, but there is a confusing tangle of programs and services trying to help, but there's a governing or governance among various state agencies, and not everybody talks to each other. There does not seem to be a statewide vision or a forum to be able to start dealing with some of these issues and coming up with a strategic plan to move forward in that. What used to be the K to 12 system, now I keep hearing referred to as P to Gray. That always now, with specifically with the advancing technologies and the rapid change of technology, you're looking at nonstop education and training throughout your work career. As you look at the millennials and some of the projections of that they are looking more increasingly as contract workers and changing careers all over the place, creates new problems. So I think the state would be well served to try and look at how we can create a forum to start addressing some of those issues. With community colleges, they have become our front line of service in terms of providing a technical workforce. Very important, but a lot of inconsistent delivery of programs and services throughout the state. Some of them will offer portable credentials or industry-recognized credentials like NIM certifications. Others don't. Some will do credit degrees. Some don't. For various specialties in terms of what business is looking for. So, some of them are partnering on apprenticeships, some don't. Our increasing lack of state appropriations for community colleges is resulting in higher tuition, making it further inaccessible, particularly to low-income and minority students. And they're not being able to keep pace with the technological change. A lot of them are operating on equipment that has been donated to them by corporations because it's obsolete for their purposes. So why are we training people on obsolete equipment when their skills will not be needed or enabled to be used by employers? In addition, how do we find the skilled instructors to be able to teach those modern technologies, and are we doing it most effectively? At the Digital Manufacturing Lab, one of the programs that we did that I think is worth looking at is we came up with a massive open online courseware, a MOOC. They also have their acronyms, but about digital manufacturing that can be used in classrooms. And, can we start looking at more of that? Because it helps. It's something that can be prepared relatively quickly and respond to the technologies. So those are some things to look at. With universities, again, from my background of representing higher ed, the declining appropriation is resulting, I'm sure you have heard ad nauseum the statistics about that, but what we're finding is, number one, this is our future workforce, and if we keep pricing them out of the market, we're losing, as Janet mentioned, the best and the brightest to out-of-state schools. They're not coming back. And that's very unfortunate. But even more important is a lot of the stars, faculty stars, the R&D stars, they're responsible for bringing massive amounts of research and development dollars, federal dollars, foundation dollars, corporate dollars to the universities, who in turn can use that not only for research and development, but also for training of the future workforce through grad assistance, through internships and that. A lot of our universities have centers of excellence that we're seeing not be so excellent anymore because of lack of investment. That in higher ed is very important. DCO has a lot of tools, at least on statute, to be able to address workforce, but again, it comes down to some of the funding. They currently have, are the administering agency for a lot of the workforce innovation and Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, funds, which are federal, but those are very limited in what they can do, and there's certainly not enough of those dollars. They tend to serve low-income and dislocated workers as opposed to general workforce needs. We used to be able to supplement those federal dollars with state dollars through the Employer Training Investment Program and a variety of other programs, but again, those have been hampered by the lack of state budget. And then I'd also like to make a couple comments.
Ms. Clark, we're going to switch to the River's Edge, and then we'll come back to your comments for one more second. If that's
Okay.
okay. Or how many more comments are there?
I can stop now and then.
No.
I'll
Go
come
ahead.
back.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to talk about innovation.
Go ahead. Talk about innovation.
Just very quickly. The state used to be a leader in technology-based economic development programs. We do have a lot of abilities. And what I think is a crime here is that Illinois has so many unbelievable assets, and assets that the state has made long-term investments in. Argonne National Laboratory, Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, universities, and that. And we are not being able to take advantage of that. And I think that there is a lot of low-hanging fruit by already having these innovation assets. And I think that there is a wonderful and tremendous role that can be played between the legislative and executive branches of the state in a bipartisan way that can better link and maximize those assets that can help lead to further advance the job creation, the new job creation, the jobs of the future, and make Illinois back a leader of that. There are a lot of other states that have similar things, programs that have lasted for 30 and 40 years that I think we could look to. I'm happy to work with you and any members of the committee on what some of the characteristics of those programs are, but I think it's just criminal if we don't start taking more and better advantage of that, because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and I think through smarter investments and wiser and avoiding the duplication that we could rise back to the top. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Zaluski and Representative Evans. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of House Bill 2972, which is the River Edge Historic Tax Credit. My name is Bonnie McDonald. I'm the president and CEO of Landmarks Illinois, and we're the statewide nonprofit organization that helps people all across the state save the historic places that matter to them in their communities. And I'm also joined by Dan Showman, who is here, and he represents the cities of Elgin and Aurora, 2 of the 5 cities that are covered by the River Edge Historic Tax Credit. I'm here to testify in support of extending the bill and want to also comment on how interesting it's been to listen to the other testimony that's been brought today, because what I find fascinating is, well, first, I think you've saved the best for last, so thank you for that, but also how we bring together so many of the tax credits that have been mentioned today. Representative Evans, I think you mentioned about data centers on the South Side. Actually, there was a developer here today, Guion Foreman, who has proposed putting a data center in a historic building on the South Side. So there we have a historic building opportunity with regard to that tax credit. Furthermore, as was mentioned, our backdrop of our cities across the state make the film tax credit possible as well. And then, finally, the historic theater tax credit, though I'm not going to sing my testimony today, I'll certainly sing the praises of having these historic theaters in our cities across the state, rehabilitated, rejuvenated to host these important productions, the new markets as well. So we bring them all together here with the River Edge Historic Tax Credit. And I'll be succinct with my testimony, I promise. The RERZ Historic Tax Credit has achieved its objective of stimulating private investment to help rejuvenate the state's economy, which includes creating jobs and revitalizing neighborhoods and downtowns in these pilot cities. The catalytic incentive works, and I ask you today to consider moving this bill forward for a full committee hearing. You have in your materials a very quick reference sheet that we put together for you so that you could see the impact of the credit. 30 projects are either complete or underway at this point in the 4 of the 5 cities. Now, with the renewal of this legislation, developer investment would total almost $200 million. The monies that would not have been spent in Illinois, as we heard, they go other places, including all of our neighbors that have some form of this incentive. Now, without it, this means the loss of that income to the state of Illinois in sales tax and income tax revenue. We will be analyzing the numbers of jobs that have been created over the next few weeks, and we'll be happy to provide those to you in a future committee meeting. Now, these properties are located in areas where there was absolutely no investment, and now they are renewing those downtowns and the neighborhoods that they are in. The buildings were vacant, they were underutilized, they were not contributing to improving the property values or paying income to their cities. New housing units have been created, as well as performing arts schools, restaurants, microbreweries. I encourage you to go to Peoria to check out the newest of those, as well as offices and organizational incubators in these properties. And they're improving the local tax rolls as well as contributing to the economy in Illinois. And it's necessary to move those projects that are currently on the drawing board to a ribbon cutting, just like the Aurora St. Charles Hospital that we just went to. I put on the back of your fact sheet one example, which is the Elgin Tower, and you can see the jobs that are on the line. This is one of 18 projects that are currently on the line with this needed extension. And thank you for passing that one-year extension, by the way. So having helped developers, property owners, and elected officials in my career over the last 20 years to revitalize these vacant and underutilized places, I have seen that this historic tax credit works. It's available in 33 other states in the nation, as I mentioned, including all of our neighbors. This tax credit ensures that we are regionally competitive and that the jobs created are local. These cannot be outsourced. I can hear Representative Curry asking me that question right now. These are all local jobs. You can't pick up and move them into the next state. So plus, because preservation is so labor intensive, anytime you've worked on an old house, you know this, it creates more jobs per capita than new construction as well. Now, passing this incentive is a wise investment that returns up to $10 for every $1 that the state invests. And it goes into the general fund at a time when we need every dollar that we can get. The credit, very importantly, is not paid out until the project is complete. And by that point, the developer has taken the entirety of the risk. So nothing is paid out until the project is done, and the ribbon cutting has happened, and the doors are open. So the state does not take the risk in this case. And by that point also, we've returned about a quarter to a third of the income for that dollar. So we've already gotten 25 cents to 33 cents into the general fund before that credit is even allocated. That's done through the income tax credits for the labor that's put in, as well as the state sales tax for the materials that are purchased. So the credit pays for itself. Not only in that first year, but then in the next 5 years and in the succeeding years after that building is put into service. So the Senate Revenue Committee has moved the companion bill onto the floor, Senate Bill 1783, and we are hopeful that the members of the House will also do the same with this bill. I'm very happy to answer questions that you have about how this credit works, as well as other projects that are happening or on the line. Thank you very much for your patience today.
Thank you for your patience. You guys have been exceptionally patient, and I'm much appreciative of that. Mr. Strasma, you're last but certainly not least.
Thank you, sir. My name is Norman Strasma. I'm from the city of Kankakee. We're interested also in the River Edge bill and for the inclusion of the city of Kankakee in that legislation. Representative Parkhurst from that area asked me to testify. I'm also testifying on behalf of the Community Foundation of Kankakee River Valley. I ran that organization executive director for 7 years and now retired from it, but still active in a number of projects. Over my 50-year career of various businesses in the city of Kankakee, I've had offices in many what's considered to be historic buildings of different vintages and so forth, but I've seen the value of maintaining those buildings, and that's why myself and others in the community are definitely interested in being part of this historic preservation legislation. The Community Foundation and the Economic Alliance have joined together several years ago to have a Kankakee River Roundtable So there's regular periodic meetings about all aspects of the river, including a Kankakee River Trail, which is now going to be connected to the state park, a 12-mile trail. That's not directly with historic preservation, but it shows the interest in focusing on the river. I also represent Kankakee Development Corporation. That's a downtown district corporation that's been going for many years to continue to upgrade the properties in the historic district and throughout the community. The Community Foundation is also very active in the development of a Frank Lloyd Wright House in Kankakee, the Bradley House, which was opened to the public 6 years ago. That property was originally built in 1900, considered to be the first prairie-style house that Wright designed, and in this year of 150th anniversary of Frank Lloyd Wright, we'll get even more publicity. Illinois is fortunate to have many Wright properties throughout the state and has probably at least 12 that are open to the public. We're working together with them to have more publicity, like an Frank Lloyd Wright Illinois Trail in Illinois. We're getting increasing cooperation from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. The State Director of Tourism recently visited the house. We appreciate Bonnie and her staff being there and helping us in the project too. So we're interested in preservation of properties within Kankakee, and we need this opportunity to be included as other cities are to do that. We're focused on the river. It's very important to the community, and we do encourage restoration. So we ask your consideration. We can provide further information on certain projects and so forth. In fact, today there's some consultants from a program called, organization called ArtSpace that has worked with many organizations and governments and around the country to take existing buildings and convert them into living quarters for those interested in the arts and other things. Kankakee has also had an increased focus on the arts. That ties in well with activities at the Frank Lloyd Wright property. So we feel we have a lot going with the foresight of the people that have maintained that property since it was originated in 1900. So we thank you for your time and consideration and for hanging around long enough to hear me. Thank you.
You were certainly, you again, all four of you were very, very patient and generous with your time today. You know, I would assume the River's Edge tax credit and the ideas that Lori espoused were just as important as having a massive data center or having Empire filmed in Chicago are. So it's part of a broader picture we're trying to paint that all this stuff matters. So thank you for your testimony here today and have a very good holiday.
Chairman, can I
Yes,
just make one
of
quick
course.
comment?
Go ahead.
Since no one from the Quad City Chamber's here today, and I am representing Moline, there's also a River's Edge bill that Representative Halpin has out there too for the Illinois Quad Cities. I would ask that you support that as well.
I don't know that how we can deal with economic incentives and not have River's Edge be a big part of that. So thank you. Sure. Thank you very much. Seeing no other business to come before the House Revenue and Finance Committee, the committee shall stand in recess until at least April 24th.